Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this What If story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐴 on Wattpad. Now let's start. Sunday mornings in the 1A Alliance dorm were never quiet. Even if half the class was still asleep, the building buzzed with the chaotic energy only 20 young heroes in training could generate. Laughter, clattering dishes, and snippets of conversations spilled out from the common areas. Izuku Midoriya loved it. After years of feeling isolated, the noise was comforting. It reminded him that he belonged here, surrounded by friends. He had already finished his morning training and breakfast, so now he sat curled up on the common room sofa, idly scrolling through his favorite heroes' Instagram pages on his phone. Around him, some classmates were still yawning over cereal bowls, while others had yet to roll out of bed. The front doors swung open with a squeak, and Denki Kaminari strolled in, arms full of letters and glossy magazines. He was on mail duty. Mina Ishido bounced toward him in her slippers, eager to see if there was anything for her. Kaminari dropped the stack on the coffee table and began sorting through them. Ishido eagerly joined him, her pink fingers flipping through envelopes as they divided them into neat piles of magazines, newspapers, and personal letters. Kaminari suddenly held up a white envelope with a strange-looking wax seal. He called out to Midoriya, asking if it was for him. Izuku blinked in surprise and stood, slipping his phone into his pocket. It wasn't often he received mail. As he approached, Kaminari handed the letter over without much thought, already turning back to the pile. Ishido leaned over his shoulder, curious as usual. Kaminari raised an eyebrow and asked why it was addressed to Izuku Midoriya too. Izuku frowned, staring at the name scrawled in elegant handwriting. He had no idea why it was addressed that way and suggested it might be a joke, though a prickle of unease ran down his spine. He tore the envelope open and read the contents. The letter introduced himself as Hisashi Midoriya Windsor III, claiming to be Izuku's father and ordering him to return to the British royal family. The paper shook slightly in Izuku's hands as he reread the words, trying to comprehend what he had just learned. He whispered in disbelief, and Ishido glanced up, sensing something was wrong. When he explained that it was from his father, her face brightened momentarily, but Izuku's expression darkened as he revealed that he hadn't seen his father in almost 12 years and that he had never reached out to him or his mother. Ishido and Kaminari exclaimed in unison, shocked by the revelation. Izuku's thoughts spun too fast to answer them. He needed to make a phone call. Clutching the letter, he hurried toward the elevator, his pulse racing. Distracted, he nearly collided with Ochako Uraraka, who stumbled and caught herself on the wall. She called after him, but the elevator doors closed before she got an answer. Puzzled, Uraraka turned to Ishido and Kaminari, asking if they knew what was going on. Kaminari, without thinking, blurted out that Izuku had received a letter from his father, who hadn't talked to him in 12 years. Mina snapped at him, reminding him not to speak ill of someone's parent, while Kaminari argued back, questioning how someone could ignore their child for so long. Uraraka's stomach twisted with worry. Upstairs, Izuku paced his room, phone tightly to his ear. When his mother, Inko, answered, he greeted her with a tense voice. She noticed the emotion in his tone and asked if everything was all right. He hesitated before revealing that he had received a letter addressed to Izuku Midoriya too, and that it was from his father. Silence crackled through the phone as Inko processed the information. When he mentioned the British royal family, she exhaled sharply, indicating that it was time for some revelations. Izuku froze, asking what she meant by time. Inko gently explained that there were things she hadn't told him about their family and that it would be better to explain in person. His grip on the phone tightened as he agreed to come home. Inko then confessed that she had lied to him about his father and who he really was, and why they had left him. Izuku felt a mix of anger and confusion. He couldn't believe his mother had hidden something so significant from him for years. He demanded to know why she would lie about such an important matter. There was a muffled sob on the line as she apologized. Izuku firmly stated that he was coming over and that she needed to explain everything. After ending the call, he shoved on his shoes and stormed toward the door, classmates staring at him in surprise. Uraraka darted to his side, eyes wide with concern. He muttered for her to leave him alone as he slammed the door behind him. Silence fell in the common room. Kaminari broke it, wondering what had just happened. Momo Yaoyorozu thoughtfully remarked that it wasn't like Midoriya to lose his temper. Jiru suggested that perhaps Bakugou might know something, but Bakugou snapped back, questioning how he would know. He crossed his arms, stating that Midoriya had never yelled at his mother before. The entire class shared a silent smirk at the mention of Auntie Inko. Kirishima asked if that meant Midoriya didn't fight with his parents much, to which Bakugou scoffed, saying he had always been his mother's little boy. Uraraka whispered a hope that they would patch things up, while Ida adjusted his glasses and reminded everyone that this was a private matter between Midoriya and his mother. The others nodded, some more reluctantly than others, and slowly drifted back to their usual routines. However, Uraraka quietly slipped away upstairs, unease gnawing at her. At the Midoriya apartment, Izuku stared at his mother, waiting for her to laugh and take it all back. But Inko's face was pale, her eyes grave. He couldn't believe what she was saying. She confirmed that they had left his father and sister, Amelia, behind in England. Izuku's stomach dropped as he processed the revelation that he had a sister. Izuku had kept in touch with his mother, who shared details about her life with Hisashi. He pressed a trembling hand to his forehead, feeling a wave of confusion wash over him. He wondered why they had left. His mother explained that his father had wanted him involved in politics from a young age, believing that stronger heirs would secure his authority. However, she could not compromise her children's well-being, which included Izuku's sister. When she refused to comply, she took Izuku away when he was just 3 years old, hoping for a peaceful life for them both. Izuku asked if his father had known about their departure. His mother revealed that they had fought often, but ultimately his father had not stopped her. She admitted that she still loved him but had chosen to prioritize her children. Feeling his world tilt, Izuku pulled his mother into a tight hug. The earlier argument still ached in his chest, but warmth began to return as he expressed his regret for yelling. His mother reassured him, understanding his anxiety and acknowledging that she should have shared the truth sooner. Izuku shook his head, recognizing the sacrifices she had made for him, wishing she had trusted him enough to confide in him earlier. Their tension gradually melted away, and they found peace together. Inko insisted that Izuku stay for a late lunch, preparing his favorite dish, katsudon. The aroma of fried pork cutlets and sweet onions filled the apartment, wrapping Izuku in comforting childhood memories. As they ate, Izuku pushed the rice around his bowl, and his mother noticed his distraction. When she gently inquired about it, he hesitated before asking about his sister. Inko's eyes softened as she described Amelia as Izuku's complete opposite, outspoken where he was shy, and bold where he hesitated. She chuckled, noting that Amelia had their father's blonde hair and the same freckles they both shared, along with a sharp wit. Izuku expressed his longing to meet her someday, and Inko encouraged him to reach out. She quickly wrote down Amelia's number, insisting that she had wanted to see him for years. Doubt flickered in Izuku's eyes as he wondered if Amelia would accept him. Inko reassured him that she had missed her little brother and would be excited to connect. The rest of the meal was filled with reminiscing about the family left behind in England, and Izuku found himself asking questions he had never thought to ask before. When the plates were cleared, he sighed, realizing it was time to return to school. Inko walked him to the door, urging him to visit more often. He promised he would try, slipping on his red sneakers. As he left, she reminded him to study hard, avoid trouble, and that she loved him. He returned the sentiment before stepping out into the bustling city. On the train back to UA, Izuku's thoughts swirled. He was the Prince of Great Britain, with a sister named Amelia. It felt surreal, as if he had stepped into someone else's life. The slip of paper with her number burned in his pocket, a reminder of the reality he was facing. Should he reach out first or wait for her? If he messaged her, what would he even say? The train slowed to a stop, pulling him from his thoughts. He remembered Uraraka and felt a pang of guilt for having brushed her off earlier. She had only been trying to help, and now he worried she thought he disliked her. His face heated at the thought of his crush possibly hating him. Upon arriving at the 1A Alliance dorms, guilt gnawed at him alongside the weight of the day's revelations. He had left without asking Izawa-sensei for permission and wondered if he would get in trouble. He kicked off his sneakers and made his way to the kitchen, where Kirishima and Ida intercepted him. Kirishima asked if he was okay, noting that Izuku hadn't looked well when he left. Izuku sheepishly apologized for the earlier scene, assuring them he was fine now. Ida suggested that he should apologize to Uraraka, noting that he had been a bit harsh. Izuku promised he would. Kirishima mentioned that Uraraka had already gone to her room, and Izuku decided to talk to her in the morning. After gulping down a glass of water, he headed for the elevator. From the sofa, Ashido called out, asking if he had shared what happened. Kirishima replied that he hadn't but seemed fine now, so it probably didn't matter. Later, in his room, Izuku sat on his bed with his phone in hand, contemplating whether to message Emilia. He worried about the time difference and whether he might wake her up. He also wondered if she knew Japanese or if he needed to write in English. Thanks to his mother's lessons and his exposure to English through movies and school, he was nearly fluent, but nerves twisted his stomach. Determined, he took a deep breath, opened his messages, and typed shakily before pressing send. He introduced himself as Izuku Midoriya, mentioning that if what his mother said was true, she should be his sister Emilia. As soon as the message was sent, he began pacing his room, his heart racing. Minutes felt like hours as he waited for a response. Just when his hope began to waver, his phone buzzed. A reply from Emilia appeared, asking if she could video call him. Izuku blinked, surprised that this was her first response. No hesitation, just a request for a video call. His fingers flew over the screen. Izuku replied affirmatively. Not even 30 seconds later, his phone rang. Izuku fumbled, feeling a rush of panic, but he forced himself to swipe and accept the call. He stammered a greeting as the screen lit up with the image of a blonde girl around his age. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes shimmering with excitement. She expressed disbelief, whispering that she couldn't believe she was seeing him again and that he had grown so much. Izuku smiled shyly, warmth filling his chest. She continued, laughing at herself, admitting that she wasn't usually emotional, but here she was, on the verge of tears. Izuku thought, dazed, that she was so pretty. He quickly dismissed the idea of developing a sister complex. He softly remarked that their mother was right, they really were opposites. Emilia tilted her head in curiosity, asking what he meant. He explained that he was a crybaby, while she didn't seem like one at all. She burst out laughing, bright and unrestrained, and declared that she had so many questions for him. Izuku encouraged her to ask away. She began with questions about his grade, school, and friends, noting that the system was a bit different in Japan. He proudly shared that he was a first year at UA High School. Emilia's jaw dropped in surprise, expressing her excitement about him attending one of the best hero schools in the world, the one where All Might taught. Izuku confirmed that he had made it into the hero course after a tough entrance exam. Her eyes sparkled with pride as she asked if their mother was with him, wanting to talk to her too. He explained that UA had turned into a boarding school, so they lived in dorms now. Emilia expressed her longing to see his dorm, wanting to know where her little brother lived. Izuku's cheeks reddened at the affectionate term, but he flipped his camera to show her his room, which was covered wall to wall in All Might memorabilia. Emilia giggled, teasing him about his hero obsession. Izuku flushed, feeling shy, but she reassured him that she loved All Might too, just not to the point of covering her walls with his face. He remarked that she didn't seem like the type to fangirl over a hero. She smirked, asking him to keep her secret about being a fangirl. Izuku laughed, realizing that Emilia was witty, just as their mother had said. Then her expression shifted into a teasing smirk as she asked if he had a girlfriend. His face went scarlet as he stammered that he didn't. She giggled, suggesting that not many girls could resist his cute face and pressed him to admit if there was someone he liked. Izuku froze for a moment before admitting, scratching his neck, that there was someone he had a crush on for a while, though he thought his chances were low since he was considered a nerd. Amelia's eyes widened in shock, revealing that she had only been joking. Monday arrived, ordinary as ever at UA. The lessons passed quickly, but Izuku's nerves kept buzzing. He wanted to apologize to 𝗧𝗓𝗃, yet the right moment never appeared. After their final class, just as he gathered the courage to approach her, Izuku called him to stay behind. Izuku flatly stated that he would let this one slide, only because he didn't have the energy to deal with him at that moment. He warned Izuku that next time, it would be straight detention. Izuku quickly assured him that it wouldn't happen again. Finally released, he hurried toward the dorms, hoping to catch 𝗧𝗓𝗃 on the way, but she was nowhere to be seen. Resigned, he retreated to his room, changed into a t-shirt and shorts, and decided he would apologize later. As he waited for the elevator, his mind drifted back to Amelia. She had shared more about herself the day before, revealing that she was also a hero in training. Juggling it with her princess duties made life hectic. Izuku still couldn't believe he had a 19-year-old sister who understood him so easily, who teased him but also worried for him. When he told her about his constant brushes with danger, she had laughed nervously, calling him a trouble magnet, and making him promise to be more careful. He thought he should message her again soon as the elevator reached the first floor. He headed toward the kitchen, his stomach grumbling. To his surprise, 𝗧𝗓𝗃 was there, sipping tea. He greeted her softly, and she glanced up, returning the greeting. Gathering his courage, he rubbed the back of his neck and apologized for the previous day, admitting that he had been rude and shouldn't have taken his anger out on her. He bowed quickly, feeling his cheeks heat up. 𝗧𝗓𝗃 blinked in surprise before smiling warmly, reassuring him that it was okay and that everyone has bad days. Relief washed over him as he thanked her. She then cheerfully invited him to a movie night later, asking if he wanted to join. Izuku hesitated only a moment before agreeing. That evening, the common room buzzed with voices as nearly the whole class gathered around the TV. Arguments flew over what movie to watch until, after much debate, they settled on Jumanji. Izuku sat on the sofa beside Kaminari, trying to relax. 10 minutes into the film, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He fished it out and his heart leapt at the sight of Amelia's name on the screen. He quickly opened her message, which informed him that their father wanted to see him again. Izuku replied that he had received a letter the day before, where their father made it sound like an order. Amelia humorously noted that he always made things sound serious and asked when he planned to visit. Izuku expressed uncertainty, mentioning that he couldn't just leave school. Amelia suggested a short vacation, perhaps a week or two, with their mother as well. Izuku replied that he would love to, but he needed to talk to the principal first. She urged him to call her once he did, expressing how much she missed him. Suddenly, Kaminari leaned over his shoulder, startling him and asking who Amelia was. Izuku nearly toppled off the sofa, sputtering that she was not his girlfriend. The commotion drew attention, and before he could react, 𝗧𝗓𝗃 appeared behind him and snatched the phone out of his hands. Izuku yelped, demanding she give it back. 𝗧𝗓𝗃 teased, waving his phone high and noting that the messages were in English, implying a foreign girlfriend. Kaminari egged her on, asking what it said. 𝗧𝗓𝗃's eyes widened as she skimmed the screen, squealing in excitement and dodging Izuku's desperate grabs. The room erupted with curiosity as 𝗂𝗃𝗃 chimed in, asking what it said. Finally, Izuku wrestled his phone back, glaring at them with a scarlet face, insisting on his privacy. 𝗧𝗓𝗃 grinned, claiming her love radar was tingling. 𝗂𝗃𝗃 pressed for more details, and 𝗧𝗓𝗃 dramatically revealed that Amelia had written how she hoped everything worked out and that she missed him. The room erupted with teasing, and Izuku's patience snapped as he declared that she was not his girlfriend. He felt overwhelmed as he stormed toward the elevator, his face flushed. As the doors closed behind him, Todoroki spoke calmly, suggesting that 𝗧𝗓𝗃 should apologize to Midoriya later. 𝗧𝗓𝗃 admitted she had gone too far, while Kaminari expressed his surprise that Midoriya had a foreign girlfriend. Mineta, frustrated, slammed his tiny fists against the armrest, lamenting that Midoriya got a girl before him, and a foreigner at that. 𝗧𝗓𝗃 stood up to stretch, announcing her intention to head to bed, and 𝗧𝗓𝗃 called out a good night as she disappeared into the elevator. Later, in Izuku's room, he collapsed onto his bed and opened Amelia's chat, his fingers flying over the screen. He shared with her that his classmates now thought she was his foreign girlfriend. Amelia found the situation amusing and remarked on his interesting friends, while Izuku noted that most of them didn't understand the concept of privacy. Amelia encouraged him to see the bright side, suggesting it might make his girl jealous, to which Izuku insisted she wasn't his girl and doubted her feelings for him. Amelia playfully disagreed, and as their conversation wrapped up, Izuku promised to video call her the next day before settling down for the night, feeling lighter than he had in days. 2 days later, Izuku finally managed to visit his mother again, this time with proper permission. As he stepped into the familiar apartment, the weight of school, training, and secrets seemed to melt away. He excitedly explained everything about Amelia and his upcoming trip, using animated gestures to emphasize his words. Inko listened quietly, her fingers nervously twisting around her teacup. She expressed her concerns about leaving work but encouraged him to go alone, insisting he deserved a vacation. Izuku leaned forward, urging her to join him, saying Amelia wanted to meet her too, but Inko shook her head, revealing her hesitation about facing his father. Izuku felt the heaviness of her words and, despite wanting to argue, he refrained. He sighed, agreeing not to push her, but insisted she at least sign the necessary papers, promising that next time, he would ensure she came along. This earned a small laugh from Inko as she signed the forms. When it was time for him to leave, she pulled him into a longer-than-usual hug, whispering about how fast he had grown. He reassured her he would see her in a week, and she reminded him to be careful, asking him to stay out of trouble. Izuku grinned, raising a fist like All Might, and promised to try, but added that he couldn't ignore a villain if he encountered one, given his provisional license. Inko chuckled despite her worry, asking him to simply not get hurt. Half an hour later, Izuku slipped back into UA, the permission forms tucked securely into his jacket. He had barely beaten curfew, and Aizawa was already at the dorm entrance, his scarf draped loosely around his shoulders. Aizawa acknowledged him, expressing relief that he made it back on time. Izuku quickly presented the signed form, and Aizawa scanned it with a practiced disinterest, inquiring about his departure time. After confirming he would leave the next morning, Aizawa advised him to stay out of trouble, noting that he had a knack for attracting it. Izuku inwardly groaned at the comment but agreed to return in a week. Aizawa instructed him to get packing, as he wouldn't have time the next day. The next morning, Izuku woke early, meticulously checking his packed belongings. He muttered to himself as he moved around his dorm room, ensuring he had everything he needed. His phone buzzed with a message from Amelia, asking if he was on his way to the airport yet. He replied that he would be soon, mentioning the long flight ahead. Amelia assured him she would be there to pick him up and asked him to message her when he landed. With All Might away on a business trip, Izuku messaged him about his trip, explaining it was for family matters. His mentor approved, emphasizing the importance of rest for his growth. Feeling motivated, Izuku zipped his suitcase shut, donned his jacket, and took one last glance at his All Might-themed room, promising his posters he would return. He locked the door and headed toward the elevator. Downstairs, the common room buzzed with chatter and the clinking of dishes as his classmates enjoyed breakfast. The elevator doors opened, drawing everyone's attention to Izuku, who stood neatly dressed with his suitcase in hand. Kirishima called out, surprised by the suitcase, and dozens of eyes focused on him, causing Izuku's heart to race. He hesitated before explaining that he was going away for a little while. Ida, adjusting his glasses, inquired about his destination and confirmed he had obtained proper permission. Izuku waved the signed form, assuring them he was going abroad for a week and hoped to catch up on homework when he returned. Ida readily agreed to help. Yaoyorozu kindly offered him breakfast, but Izuku glanced at his watch and realized he was running late. He thanked her but hurried toward the door, suitcase wheels rattling behind him. Uraraka suddenly stood up, announcing she would see him off, which caught Ishido's attention as she followed. Uraraka called out to him, and Izuku paused at the entrance, crouched to tie his shoes. He sheepishly apologized for not informing them sooner, explaining it had all been sudden. Uraraka reassured him, asking him to promise he would be careful and return safely. Her earnest gaze made his chest tighten, and he nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and determination as he headed out. "I promise," he said. She asked with reluctance if he was going far. He replied that he was going to England, checking his belongings one last time. "England," she repeated, her brows raised in shock. "How come?" He hesitated, wanting to be honest but unsure how much to reveal. "I'm visiting family," he finally admitted. "The girl the others were teasing me about the other day was my sister." "Why your sister?" 𝐬𝗏𝗏 blinked, surprise giving way to relief. "But I thought you only had your mom." "Yeah, so did I. Turns out I've got an older sister in England. She doesn't know much Japanese, so that's why we text in English." "Oh, I see." A small smile tugged at her lips. "Well, have fun then." "Thanks. I'll see you in a week." Izuku waved before dashing out the door. 𝐬𝗏𝗏 lingered for a moment, warmth blooming in her chest, before she returned to the dining hall, unable to hide her smile. Ishido raised an eyebrow and asked what happened. "Nothing in particular. Just talked," 𝐬𝗏𝗏 replied. "What did he say?" Azui inquired. "He said he's going to England for a week," she explained. "England?" Hagakure gasped. "Why?" 𝐬𝗏𝗏 answered that he was visiting family, specifically his sister. "His sister," most of the class exclaimed. Bakugou barked from the kitchen, slamming a pan for emphasis, insisting she was lying. "I'm not lying. He mentioned thinking his mom was his only family until recently." "And Mina," 𝐬𝗏𝗏 glanced at Ishido with a triumphant grin, "the girl he was messaging. That was her." "Sorry, but your love senses failed this time." Ishido froze, then dramatically clutched her head. "What? My love senses never fail." "Wait, then why were they texting in English?" Tokoyami asked darkly. "Deku said she doesn't know much Japanese," 𝐬𝗏𝗏 explained. "That actually makes sense," Kirishima said, nodding. "Besides, Midoriyabro's way too pure to score a foreign girlfriend. No offense to him." Several classmates laughed and nodded in agreement. Bakugou just growled louder, sparks snapping at his fingertips. By the time the plane began its descent, Izuku felt as if he had been strapped into that cramped seat for an eternity. His legs ached, his back protested, and his stomach had long since grown tired of recycled cabin air and tiny packets of pretzels. He leaned toward the window, eyes flicking hungrily toward the distant green and gray patchwork of the English countryside below. Finally, he muttered, shoulders sagging with relief as the flight attendant's voice reminded everyone to fasten seatbelts. The landing was mercifully smooth, but the moment the wheels hit the ground, Izuku felt a weight lift from his chest. He was on solid ground again. Japan might have had villains lurking in every shadow, but at least his feet weren't dangling over the ocean anymore. Most of the passengers leapt up the instant the seatbelt sign blinked off, filling the narrow aisle with a flurry of elbows and bags. Izuku stayed seated, clutching his phone. He had learned the hard way that rushing only made him more anxious. Instead, he typed a quick message. "Izuku, the plane just landed. Amelia, already waiting for you inside the airport." His chest tightened in anticipation. He had seen her over video calls and messaged her countless times, but to actually meet face to face was something else entirely. Finally, when the crowd thinned, Izuku wrestled his medium-sized suitcase down from the overhead compartment. He followed the overhead signs, checking and double-checking that he wasn't headed to baggage claim by mistake. Every announcement echoed strangely in English, so fast he could barely catch more than a few words. And then he saw her. Amelia stood near the arrival gates, her blonde hair practically glowing under the airport lights. She looked radiant, regal in a way that made her stand out even among the crowd. At her side were two men in perfectly tailored suits, who looked like they'd been carved out of stone. She hadn't spotted him yet. His heart raced. Should he just walk over? What if he startled her? After all, he wasn't sure how much he resembled the little brother she remembered, even if they had been video calling regularly. He raised his arm and called out to her. "Amelia! Over here!" Her head snapped toward his voice. For a heartbeat, her eyes widened in disbelief, then she bolted forward at full speed. Izuku barely managed a nervous greeting before she swept him up in a fierce embrace. "My baby brother." Amelia's voice trembled against his ear. "You've grown so much. I can't believe I finally get to see you again." Izuku's throat tightened, and his eyes pricked with emotion. "I'm so happy," he whispered, returning her embrace as she squeezed him even tighter. "Let me look at you properly." She drew back just far enough to cup his face in her hands. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks, catching the light as she smiled through them. Izuku blinked in alarm. "Why are crying?" Amelia suddenly swiped at her face with both hands, almost playfully. "Enough. No more crying." She reprimanded herself. Izuku let out a startled chuckle. "Don't be so rough with your eyes. You'll hurt them." "You sound just like Mother," Amelia teased, her laughter bubbling through her tears. Then, straightening, she grabbed his hand as if he were still 3 years old. "Come on. You must be exhausted. Let's get you home. Tomorrow you'll meet Father, and after that, I'll show you around properly." They turned toward the suited men, but one of them stepped forward, frowning. "Princess Amelia, who is this boy?" Izuku flinched at the question. Amelia, however, spun on her heel like a storm. "You imbecile." Her voice rang through the airport, sharp enough to make Izuku jump. "How can you not recognize my brother, the Prince of Britain? Shame on you." The bodyguards stiffened, then immediately bowed their heads in unison. "Forgive us, Your Highness. We weren't informed of his arrival." Izuku waved his hands frantically. "It's fine. Really." His voice cracked, half out of nerves, half out of secondhand embarrassment. Still holding his hand, Amelia tugged him toward the sleek black car waiting outside. "Was it really necessary to yell at them like that?" he asked timidly as they slid into the plush back seat. "I mean, even I'd have a hard time recognizing myself after 12 years. Amelia gave him a sideways glance, her smile gentle but firm. "Izuku, we are royalty. Authority matters here. If we aren't taken seriously, no one listens. But you don't have to be mean about it." He shifted in his seat, cheeks puffing in a small pout. Her laughter rang bright in the car. "You never changed, do you?" The car ride blurred into warmth and chatter. Amelia leaned close, asking questions about school, heroes, and even little details like what his favorite snack was these days. Izuku blushed scarlet when she told him of how he used to sneak into her bed as a toddler because he was afraid of the dark. "Why, you didn't have to tell me that." He sputtered, hiding his face. "But it's adorable," she teased. Izuku pressed his face against the window as the car rolled up to the towering gates of the castle. The sprawling structure loomed against the twilight, resembling something out of a storybook with its stone walls, tall spires, and countless glowing windows. He was filled with awe as he realized this was where Amelia lived. She gently corrected him, saying it was where they both lived. She revealed that their father had never changed his room, even after everything that had happened, and that he missed both of them. A warm feeling stirred in Izuku's chest, a mix of comfort and resentment, but he smiled nonetheless. Inside, the entrance hall took his breath away. The ceiling soared high above, glittering chandeliers raining light down on the marble floors. 2 neat lines of maids and butlers stood waiting, bowing deeply as Amelia led him forward. 1 maid and 1 butler stepped ahead of the group, introducing themselves as Marissa, head of the maids, and Elliot, head of the butlers. They offered their assistance, and the entire staff welcomed Izuku home in unison. He was startled by the chorus, but Amelia giggled and encouraged him to get used to it. Curious glances were exchanged among the staff, who had never seen their princess smile so brightly. Amelia asked if he was hungry, suggesting a meal would do him good before sleep. Overwhelmed, Izuku agreed. Marissa and Elliot promptly set to work preparing the dining hall and his room. Amelia took his hand, leading him down one of the vast corridors, where chandeliers glittered above and tall windows opened onto moonlit terraces. They stopped before 2 enormous carved doors. Amelia pointed to the right, indicating his room, and gestured to the left for hers. Izuku let out a long breath, relieved that he wouldn't get lost with her so close. When she opened the double doors, he was stunned by the size of the room, which could easily fit his mother's entire apartment. The emerald green walls, massive velvet-draped bed, and ornate furnishings overwhelmed him. He exclaimed that it was way too big, and Amelia giggled, pointing out the doors leading to his closet and bathroom. She playfully nudged him toward the bathroom, encouraging him to freshen up before dinner. After a quick bath that washed away his travel stiffness, Izuku donned some loungewear and padded across the hall to knock on Amelia's door. She greeted him, dressed casually in a cropped hoodie and sweatpants, which made him smile. As she reached up to touch his damp hair, he froze, feeling his cheeks flush. She scolded him gently for not drying his hair properly and hurried back to her room, returning with a towel. Despite his protests, she rubbed the towel over his head, making his hair even messier. Izuku sighed but felt a warmth he hadn't realized he missed. After finishing, Amelia tossed the towel back and took his hand again, urging him to join her for dinner. The dining hall was vast, and Izuku half expected to hear his voice echo. The table stretched long, gleaming under the chandeliers, laden with platters of steaming food. He sat beside Amelia, staring at the unfamiliar dishes. After hesitating, he took a bite and was pleasantly surprised by the rich flavors. They ate for a while before curiosity got the better of him, prompting him to ask where she trained to be a hero. Amelia explained that it was more of an academy for elites, where members of noble families and royals were expected to lead. Izuku's excitement grew as he realized he had forgotten to ask about her quirk. Amelia giggled, recalling how fascinated he had always been with it. She revealed her quirk was called pyrokinesis, allowing her to create and control fire with her mind. Izuku was amazed, nearly falling out of his chair with excitement, eager to document it in his analysis notebook. Amelia teased him about still keeping those notebooks, and Izuku felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him. When she asked about his quirk, he hesitated, knowing he couldn't reveal the truth about one for all. Instead, he forced a laugh, explaining that his quirk had only manifested a year ago, after everyone had thought he was quirkless. He described it as a strengthening quirk, allowing him to use power beyond his body's limits. Amelia listened intently, her gaze steady as she absorbed his words. But if he pushed too hard, he could break bones. Her eyes darted to the scars crisscrossing his arms and hands. She asked if those were from training. He scratched the back of his neck and admitted that they were. She winced and urged him to promise he would be careful. He nodded quickly, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics until they finally pushed their plates away. The next morning, Izuku was jolted awake by Amelia's cheerful voice calling him for breakfast. He groaned, burying his head in the pillow, wishing for just 5 more minutes. Ignoring him, she playfully threatened him with a splash of icy water that hit his face, causing him to bolt upright in surprise. Amelia doubled over laughing, and after a moment, Izuku joined in, both siblings wheezing with laughter. Once they calmed down, Amelia's eyes sparkled with mischief as she asked if he had his hero costume with him. Izuku blinked, realizing he did, thanks to Principal Nizu and his homeroom teacher. Amelia instructed him to change and meet her outside in the corridor so they could grab breakfast and head straight to the academy, as they had overslept. As Izuku stepped into the hall in his green, sleek costume, Amelia emerged in her own battle gear. They both froze for a moment before exclaiming how cool each other's costumes were, bursting into laughter again. Amelia declared that they both looked amazing, and Izuku grinned nervously, feeling his stomach twist with anticipation. As they made their way to the dining hall, Izuku knew who would be waiting for them. The hall was quieter than the night before, sunlight streaming through tall windows. At the far end of the long table sat a broad-shouldered man with golden hair and freckles dusting his stern face. His presence was commanding without a word. Izuku's step faltered as he realized who it was. The table was set for 3, with one sibling on each of Hisashi's sides. The man's eyes lifted, locking onto Izuku's, and he said nothing, just watched as Izuku's heart pounded against his ribs. Amelia slipped her hand around his arm and gently tugged him forward. Izuku swallowed hard and managed a hesitant greeting. Still, Hisashi remained silent, the weight of his gaze pressing down on Izuku until they finally took their seats. Breakfast was awkwardly quiet, broken only by the clink of silverware. Izuku kept sneaking glances, unsure if he should speak first. Finally, Hisashi's deep voice rumbled across the table, inquiring about Inko. Izuku stiffened but forced himself to answer, explaining that she was well but not ready to visit. Hisashi simply acknowledged this, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched again until Amelia stood abruptly, suggesting they head out to avoid being late. As they turned to leave, Hisashi called out to Izuku, causing him to freeze. He approached, and Hisashi suddenly rose and wrapped him in a warm embrace. Izuku gasped in surprise, initially stiff but soon feeling warmth flood through him. He hugged back, feeling the strength and steadiness of his father's arms. Hisashi welcomed him home, and Izuku's throat tightened with emotion. Amelia playfully complained that their father was keeping Izuku all to himself, and for the first time, Izuku thought he saw a small smile on Hisashi's lips. Later, seated in the royal family's sleek car, Izuku fidgeted with his gloved fingers, his reflection in the window revealing wide, nervous eyes. He admitted to Amelia that he was feeling anxious. She bumped her shoulder against his, reassuring him that most of the people they would meet were kind. However, her mischievous grin did little to ease his nerves. The car slowed, rolling to a stop before towering gates that led to a sprawling campus of Gothic towers and modern training fields. Amelia gestured with a flourish, welcoming him to the elite hero academy of England. As they stepped through the wide gates, Izuku felt dozens of eyes turn his way. He whispered nervously that it felt like everyone was staring at him. Amelia teased that they probably were, especially since it wasn't every day a foreign-looking boy strolled in, especially not with the princess. As they walked through the marble-floored hallways, the stares intensified. Some students whispered behind their hands, while others looked as though they had seen a ghost. Finally, they reached their destination, a classroom buzzing with students. The gray-haired professor at the front hadn't yet begun the lesson. Amelia called out politely to Mr. Stanford, who turned and nearly dropped his chalk upon seeing her. He greeted her with surprise and then trailed off as his eyes landed on Izuku. Amelia introduced him as her younger brother, and the professor's jaw dropped in shock before he bowed deeply, apologizing for his rudeness. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck, explaining that he was only there temporarily and would be returning to Japan soon. The professor praised him for being a diligent student and asked where he studied. When Izuku mentioned UA High School, the room fell silent, and the professor blinked in disbelief, asking if it was true that All Might himself taught there. Izuku straightened proudly, confirming that All Might was indeed his teacher and that he had learned so much from him already. Gasps erupted around the room, and the professor looked as if he might faint. Amelia cleared her throat pointedly, prompting the professor to regain his composure. He introduced Izuku to the class as an important guest who would be joining them temporarily during his stay. Whispers flared up again, with students expressing disbelief that the prince was in their midst and that he was being trained by All Might. Feeling heat rise to his cheeks, Izuku was relieved when the professor announced that they would be doing a practical exercise, an obstacle course. The class erupted in cheers and was instructed to change into their training clothes and gather outside. While waiting, students clustered around Izuku, peppering him with questions about Japan, UA, and famous pro-heroes he had met. The flood of voices was overwhelming. Izuku's hands tightened around his hero suit, but before he could feel overwhelmed, Amelia appeared like a guardian angel. She slipped between him and the crowd, pulling him safely out of reach. She encouraged him to breathe, offering a reassuring wink. Once outside, another professor joined them, clearly a pro-hero, judging by the way his uniform fit his broad frame. Together, they explained the rules of the course, which would be run in pairs with times recorded for evaluation. Amelia asked Izuku if he had ever done an obstacle course before, to which he replied that he had plenty of experience at UA. She assured him he would do great. One by one, students tackled the course, and Izuku took mental notes about their quirks, some swift, some flashy, and some downright ingenious. His fingers itched for his beloved analysis notebook. Finally, his name was called, and he was paired with a brown-haired guy named Daniel Adams. At the start line, Izuku took a breath and activated full cowling at 5%, green sparks lighting up his frame and drawing murmurs of awe from the onlookers. When the signal came, they shot forward. Izuku vaulted over obstacles with ease, his speed blurring his movements. Daniel was quick as well, his quirk boosting his agility, but Izuku crossed the finish line first. The class erupted into cheers, and Izuku flushed at the sound. Daniel approached, breathing but smiling, and complimented Izuku on his performance, thanking him for the race. Izuku grinned and returned the compliment, asking Daniel to call him by his first name. Daniel's blue eyes brightened at the suggestion. Amelia bounced over, her voice cheerful as she praised Izuku for looking cool. Izuku's cheeks burned, but his smile was genuine. Daniel turned to Amelia, bowing slightly and introducing himself. She tilted her head with a sly grin, teasing Daniel about being Izuku's first friend at the academy. Daniel stammered in agreement, his cheeks turning pink, and Amelia playfully instructed him to take care of Izuku while she returned to her own classes. The day continued smoothly. While Amelia went back to her elite-level class, Izuku stayed with Daniel, finding comfort in their easy camaraderie. By the end of the day, he was not only less nervous but genuinely enjoying himself. When the final bell rang, Amelia was waiting by the gates. Together, they climbed into the royal car that would take them back to the castle. As Izuku leaned against the window, watching the academy fade into the distance, he thought that maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. Amelia announced that their father had messaged her, saying he didn't have work that evening and wanted to spend time with them. Izuku felt a mix of excitement and nerves at the prospect. Amelia giggled at her brother's honesty, playfully nudging his arm and reminding him that their father was just that, his dad. When they arrived at the castle, both siblings retreated to their rooms to freshen up. Izuku showered quickly and was drying his messy green hair when his phone chimed on the bed. He picked it up, and his face lit up when he saw the sender. 𝐬𝗧𝗏 messaged him, hoping he was doing well and having fun in England. Izuku nearly dropped the phone from grinning too hard and quickly replied, sharing his excitement about his day at his sister's hero school. Her response came quickly, and they exchanged cheerful messages. Izuku impulsively decided to send her a selfie of himself and Amelia, which prompted 𝐬𝗧𝗏 to comment on Amelia's beauty and their contrasting hair colors. As the conversation continued, Izuku realized that he had never thought about his English heritage before. Meanwhile, back at UA, 𝐬𝗧𝗏 shared the photo with her friends, who were amazed by Amelia's looks and the unexpected revelation about Izuku's background. Their astonishment was palpable as they processed the information. Just then, Izuku messaged 𝐬𝗧𝗏 that he had to go, as he was going to grab something to eat with his dad and Amelia. He pocketed his phone and left his room, gently knocking on Amelia's door before heading to the living hall. The space was enormous, like a grand living room multiplied 3 times over, complete with high ceilings and a glowing fireplace. Their father was already there, seated in a deep armchair, looking both regal and relaxed. Amelia greeted their father as she took a seat across from him, and Izuku nervously added his greeting before sliding onto the sofa beside her. Hisashi's eyes softened as they landed on Izuku, and he asked if he had enjoyed his day. Izuku lit up, excitedly sharing how much fun he had at the academy. Hisashi smiled, a rare expression that warmed the room. There was a pause before Izuku shifted, fidgeting with his hands as he gathered the courage to ask something that had been on his mind. Hisashi encouraged him to go on, his voice calm and patient. Izuku swallowed, ready to voice his thoughts. Hisashi leaned back, thoughtful as he explained his name. His great-grandfather, Hisashi I, was Japanese and had married into the royal family. The name was passed down, which was why their family name was Midoriya, but to preserve lineage, the English name Windsor was kept. Few people knew about their dual heritage, although it was publicly known that Izuku's mother, the queen, was Japanese. Izuku's eyes widened in realization, and his nerves eased, replaced by fascination. The rest of the evening passed in easy conversation, with Izuku brimming with questions about everything from Hisashi's youth to how he met Inko. Hisashi promised to share that story another day. In turn, he asked about Izuku's life in Japan and how he and his mother managed all those years. Slowly, the walls between them began to crumble. By the time they were called for dinner, Izuku felt comfortable enough to call Hisashi Dad, the word tumbling from his lips with shy pride. Dinner was a quieter affair, filled with little smiles and gentle teasing between Emilia and her brother. At one point, 𝐻𝐵 asked about their plans for the next day. Emilia winced, revealing she had a meeting and wouldn't be able to go to the academy with Izuku. 𝐻𝐵 then offered for Izuku to spend the day with him instead, startling both kids. Izuku blinked and broke into a grin, expressing his excitement. That night, Izuku tossed and turned in his bed, too restless to sleep. Eventually, he padded down the hall and knocked timidly on Emilia's door. She called for him to come in immediately. He stepped inside, feeling sheepish and curious about how she knew it was him. She giggled and closed the book in her hands, teasing him about who else would knock at that hour. Her room was warm and stylish, all beige and white with gold accents, similar to his own but far more polished. She patted the other side of her oversized bed, inviting him to sleep there for the night, reminding him that he used to do so all the time. Relieved, Izuku slid under the covers, finally relaxing. The lights dimmed at Emilia's touch of the remote, leaving only the sound of their quiet breathing. After a moment, Emilia's soft voice broke the silence, asking about the name of the girl he liked. Izuku's face turned crimson as he whispered her name, 𝐻𝐵. Emilia teased him, giggling, and reached over to kiss his forehead, wishing him good night. Izuku smiled into the pillow, feeling warmth spread through him. It felt nice to be cared for by an older sister as he drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Emilia shook him awake with her sing-song voice, announcing it was time to get up. He sat up groggily, rubbing his eyes, only to find his sister already dressed in formal wear, looking every bit the princess she was. When he panicked about being late, she teased him about the time. Izuku scrambled out of bed, worried about whether 𝐻𝐵 had been waiting for him. After a rushed shower and change, Izuku made his way to 𝐻𝐵's office. He hesitated at the heavy door before knocking. 𝐻𝐵's deep voice invited him in, and he glanced up from his paperwork as Izuku entered, noting he was right on time. Izuku was surprised, thinking he was late, but 𝐻𝐵 assured him that some work had come up that morning. 𝐻𝐵 stood, straightening his blazer, and instructed Oliver to ready the car for their outing. 20 minutes later, they were seated in a cozy cafe tucked away in the city. 𝐻𝐵 gestured around fondly, recalling how he used to bring Inko there often. The smell of baked goods and coffee filled the air, making Izuku's stomach rumble loudly. 𝐻𝐵 laughed, and Izuku felt a rush of warmth, admiring his father's manly demeanor. When their food arrived, Izuku nearly melted over the delicious Oreo milkshake, exclaiming how good it was. 𝐻𝐵 chuckled softly, mentioning that Inko used to say the same thing. For a moment, sadness clouded his eyes, which Izuku noticed immediately. Wanting to cheer him up, he eagerly asked what they would do after their meal. 𝐻𝐵 smirked knowingly, asking whether Izuku preferred modern or old-fashioned. Izuku tilted his head, puzzled, but he had a feeling the day would be unforgettable. After responding with modern, they finished their food and climbed back into the royal black car. Izuku assumed they were heading back to the castle, but the mischievous glint in 𝐻𝐵's eye told him otherwise. Unable to hide his impatience, he asked what they were going to do. 𝐻𝐵 leaned back, looking pleased with himself, and explained that if Izuku had chosen old-fashioned, they would have gone horse riding. When Izuku inquired about what modern meant, 𝐻𝐵 replied matter-of-factly, motorcycles. He explained that, as the kingdom's technology had evolved, horse riding was mostly a hobby now, and motorcycles were used for faster travel. Izuku's face lit up with excitement at the thought of riding a motorcycle, a dream he had held since he saw a hero use one as part of his gear. 𝐻𝐵 grinned at his son's enthusiasm, confirming they would first check on how Izuku's motorcycle was coming along at the royal workshop. When Izuku learned that 𝐻𝐵 had commissioned a bike for him, he was stunned, his disbelief evident. 𝐻𝐵 smiled at his son's reaction, explaining that the workshop built every vehicle for the royal family and that Izuku's should be nearly finished. For a moment, Izuku just stared wide-eyed before instinctively throwing his arms around 𝐻𝐵, hugging him tightly. 𝐻𝐵 stumbled slightly before returning the embrace with a laugh. Minutes later, they arrived at the royal workshop, where the air smelled of metal, oil, and faint smoke. The chief engineer, with a face smudged with dirt, greeted them enthusiastically, leading them inside to showcase the handcrafted vehicles. Workers paused their tasks to bow or wave, some even demonstrating their quirks, making sparks fly or gears hover in midair. The chief explained that everything was manufactured through hard work and skill, though quirks certainly made things easier. He brought them to a massive garage door, revealing the newest creations, including Izuku's bike. As the door slowly rolled upward, Izuku's breath caught in his throat at the sight of a sleek dark green motorcycle streaked with black details, gleaming as if it had been waiting for him all along. His heart raced as he whispered in awe, asking if it was truly his. The chief confirmed it was indeed his, introducing it as the Green Hurricane. Izuku rushed forward, running his fingers along the polished frame, feeling a surge of excitement and pride. He spun back around and leapt into Hisashi's arms again, practically bouncing in place with excitement. Hisashi chuckled, ruffling his son's unruly hair and asking if he wanted to take the bike for a ride. Izuku froze mid-bounce, then wilted a little, admitting he didn't know how to ride. His father reassured him that he would teach him, and Izuku's eyes lit up with hope. 10 minutes later, both the Green Hurricane and Hisashi's own Red Devil were parked in front of the castle. They mounted up, with Izuku wobbling uncertainly as his father explained the basics: where to rest his feet, how to balance, and how to let the machine become an extension of himself. Surprisingly, Izuku took to it quickly. Within hours, he was riding in cautious circles around the courtyard, green sparks of excitement in his eyes. He sheepishly admitted that he loved everything about it, except for the helmet, which he found uncomfortable, though he privately thought he looked quite cool in it. By lunchtime, Emilia joined them and was immediately bombarded with Izuku's eager recounting of the morning's adventures. He excitedly shared details about the cafe with the best milkshakes, the workshop that built him an actual bike, and how his dad taught him to ride it. Emilia giggled behind her hand and suggested that after lunch, she could show him her 𝐻𝐮𝐬𝐽. Izuku nearly vibrated out of his chair with excitement, asking if they could all ride together. Hisashi agreed, and Emilia added that she had finished her work early just to join them. After the meal, Emilia retrieved her own teal-colored bike, and the three of them roared around the castle grounds. For Izuku, it was bliss, the wind in his face, the sound of engines thrumming like thunder, and the laughter of his family surrounding him. Days slipped by in a blur of academy lessons, late-night talks, and writing practice. Izuku grew close with Daniel Adams at the academy, while evenings were reserved for family bonding. But as quickly as it had begun, the time came for his departure. Over dinner the night before, Hisashi asked if Izuku liked it there. Without hesitation, Izuku beamed and affirmed that he did. Hisashi then suggested that they could move back so Izuku could continue his studies at the academy. Izuku's smile wavered as he expressed his longing to stay at UA until he graduated, citing his friends and teachers and the hard work he had put in. Emilia leaned in with a knowing smirk, teasing him about someone he would miss terribly back in Japan. Izuku's face turned scarlet, and Hisashi perked up, jokingly asking if he had a girlfriend. Izuku protested, burying his face in his hands as his father and sister burst into laughter. Hisashi managed to wheeze out that whoever she was, he should make it official soon, prompting another round of laughter. Emilia suggested they do something together since it was Izuku's last day. Hisashi firmly suggested horse riding, and despite his nerves, Izuku eagerly agreed. The next morning after breakfast, they visited the royal stables. Though clumsy at first, Izuku eventually found his rhythm, laughing with his father and sister as the horses carried them across the sprawling grounds. Yet, every time he smiled, he quietly thought that if only his mother were there too. By afternoon, Hisashi offered to charter a private jet again, but once more, Izuku declined, preferring to be surrounded by people rather than alone on a plane. They compromised on first class. That night, after one last family dinner, they piled into the car for the long drive to the airport. Emilia hugged him fiercely, refusing to let go at first, reminding him to work hard and not cause trouble. Izuku promised with a smile, and Hisashi pulled him into his own embrace, asking him to call when he landed and to bring his mother next time. They shared one final group hug before Izuku reluctantly pulled away, stating he needed to go or he would miss his flight. 50 minutes later, he sat in his first-class seat, the plane engines rumbling beneath him. He pressed his forehead to the cool window, excitement bubbling in his chest at the thought of seeing his mother and friends again, though the mountain of missed schoolwork loomed ahead. As he shuffled toward the train station near the airport, dragging his medium-sized suitcase behind him, he groaned inwardly about how far Japan was from Britain. The long flight had taken its toll, and he felt as if his body had been wrung out and left to dry. Upon landing, he called his father to assure him he had arrived safely and decided to head straight back to UA. It was noon in Japan, meaning his classmates were still in the middle of lessons, and the dorm would be quiet when he returned. By the time he arrived at the front of the 1A dorms, Izuku was completely drained. He barely had the energy to step inside, kick off his shoes, and collapse beside his suitcase at the entryway, sighing in relief. The timing couldn't have been worse, as the doors swung open to reveal Ida, Kirishima, and a few others returning from class. Ida welcomed him back at full volume, his excitement palpable. Izuku flinched but managed a weary smile, saying he would go change and rest a bit. Kirishima commented on how rough the flight must have been, and Izuku agreed, making his way toward the elevator. When he reached his room, he didn't even bother unpacking. He just threw himself onto the bed, limbs splayed like a starfish, exclaiming how hard traveling had been. After a short rest, his stomach reminded him it had been neglected for too long. He changed into a worn t-shirt and a pair of shorts before heading downstairs, deciding unpacking could wait. The elevator doors slid open to reveal Mr. Izawa talking to a group of students, his perpetually bored expression suggesting the weight of the world was a bit much for him. Izawa greeted Izuku flatly, asking if he had caused any trouble in England. Izuku quickly replied no, trying to look as responsible as possible, though he knew that throwing the nation into chaos with the prince's sudden return might count as trouble. Izawa informed him that he had missed a lot of schoolwork. Be ready. Izuku explained that he had studied at the elite hero academy in England with his sister, trying to sound upbeat. This revelation caused Izawa's expression to shift, his eyes widening slightly. The students erupted in excitement, with Kirishima practically shouting about the prestigious nature of the English Hero Academy. Kaminari asked if it was one of the best programs in the world, while Izuku sheepishly mentioned that his sister was talented, wondering if he had shared too much information. Ashido, lounging on one of the sofas, asked if it was true that Izuku was half English. He nodded, admitting he had only found out the week before. Uraraka approached him with a warm smile, apologizing for sharing the news and welcoming him back. Izuku managed a shy smile in return, expressing that it was fine. Todoroki, from across the room, asked if he was really English, and Izuku confirmed that he was half, with his mother being Japanese. Izawa interrupted, reminding Izuku to prepare for a mountain of makeup work before leaving the room, which left Izuku sighing in defeat. Still feeling hungry, he grabbed a cup of instant ramen from the kitchen and sat at the dining table. Uraraka joined him, inquiring about his time in England. Izuku's face lit up as he shared how amazing it was. Recalling his initial fear of meeting his dad, but how kind he turned out to be. They had a lot of fun together. Uraraka giggled, encouraging him to show her pictures. He eagerly unlocked his phone and handed it over. Ashido squealed with excitement, diving onto Uraraka to see the photos. They quickly gathered around, flipping through the images. Ashido gasped at a picture of Izuku's sister in her hero costume, while Kaminari noted that Izuku didn't look much like his family, except for the freckles and eyes. Izuku laughed nervously, acknowledging he had heard that before. Kirishima declared that Izuku's dad looked manly, and Izuku admitted this with pride. Ida appeared dramatically, announcing that Mr. Izawa had called for Izuku, and Principal Nizu required his presence immediately. Ashido pouted about not being done looking at the pictures as Izuku retrieved his phone. He promised to show her more later, tossed his ramen cup, slipped on his shoes, and waved goodbye. The principal's office had a faint scent of tea and paper. Upon entering, Izuku froze at the sight of Nizu at his desk, with Izawa and All Might also present. Nizu greeted him cheerfully, referring to him as Prince Izuku of Great Britain. Izuku felt a wave of panic wash over him. Izawa interrupted, tossing a newspaper at him, which Izuku caught instinctively. His stomach dropped as he saw the front page featuring a photo of him and Emilia hugging at the airport, with the headline proclaiming his return. All Might asked if it was true, and Izuku swallowed hard, nodding. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 folded his paws, inquiring if his return meant he didn't plan to relocate to England anytime soon. Izuku firmly stated that he intended to graduate from UA first. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 pressed further about keeping his identity hidden, to which Izuku responded that he didn't like attention or special treatment and wanted to earn his achievements through his own efforts. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 chuckled, assuring him they would help keep his secret as long as possible, but warned that if students found out, it could lead to competition or hostility. He mentioned the potential for political complications and villain targeting. Izuku's chest tightened at the thought, but All Might offered a reassuring smile, reminding him that Japanese media wouldn't care much about an English newspaper. This eased Izuku slightly. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 dismissed him, and Izuku bowed quickly, clutching the newspaper to his chest as he thanked the principal. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 encouraged him to remember that they would do their part, but the rest was up to him. Stepping out into the hall, Izuku exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. Younger Midoriya, a familiar deep voice called, startling him. All Might had followed him out of the principal's office. Izuku approached him, still holding the newspaper. All Might, speaking in a steady and grounding tone, mentioned that he thought Izuku might need someone to talk to afterward. Izuku hesitated and then sank onto a nearby bench, staring at the headline again. He expressed how strange it felt to have the world know about his father and how he didn't want to be treated differently at UA, the one place where he had worked hard for everything. All Might lowered himself beside him, a faint smile on his lips as he shared that he had felt similarly in his youth, burdened with secrets and wanting to be seen as more than just a title. He reminded Izuku that he had the right to choose how the world saw him and that if he wanted to be known as Midoriya, the boy who worked hard to get into UA, then that was how it should be. Izuku felt a tightening in his chest at All Might's words, voicing his fears about what would happen if people found out. All Might simply advised him to keep moving forward, emphasizing that he would still be himself, not defined by a title but by his actions. Izuku felt grateful for the encouragement, carefully folding the newspaper and tucking it under his arm. He thanked All Might, expressing that he needed to hear that. All Might stood, flashing his usual grin for a moment before reminding Izuku to return to his dorm, where his friends were likely waiting and already speculating about his meeting with 𝐻𝐻𝐿. Izuku laughed weakly, feeling the heaviness in his chest lift a little. He stood, bowed slightly, and whispered that he wouldn't let All Might down. All Might replied with pride that he knew Izuku wouldn't. On his way back to the dorms, Izuku pulled out his phone and called his mom, softly telling her that they both missed her so much. Inko paused for a moment before gently sighing. She expressed how much she missed them too. Izuku eagerly suggested that she join him during spring break, insisting there would be no excuses this time. After a thoughtful pause, she considered it, acknowledging that perhaps it was time to face his father again. Izuku chuckled, noting that she should have done that long ago. His mother quickly shifted the topic, asking him to share everything about his trip. Izuku's excitement was palpable as he recounted his adventures. He described how Emilia showed him her hero school, how he made a new friend, and how his father gifted him a motorcycle named the Green Hurricane, teaching him how to ride it. He even mentioned learning to ride horses just before his departure. Inko laughed warmly, expressing her happiness for him. The following morning, classes resumed as usual. While most of Class 1A experienced a typical day, Izuku felt as though he was trudging through thick mud. He struggled to keep up with the lessons after just a week away. Notes blurred together, formulas slipped from his mind, and he found himself distracted by his notebook filled with hero analysis instead of algebra. Fortunately, Ida quickly noticed Izuku's distress. During breaks, he took it upon himself to tutor Izuku, meticulously guiding him through equations and re-explaining the previous week's hero exercises with precision. He ensured that Izuku grasped everything he had missed. Izuku expressed his gratitude for Ida's help as they walked back to the dorms that evening, his mind still swirling with information. Ida, with his usual enthusiasm, insisted it was his duty as a class representative and a friend. Despite his exhaustion, Izuku smiled, appreciating Ida's genuine kindness. As they approached the dorm building, they noticed a crowd gathered on the lawn, buzzing with excitement. Something large loomed at the center, capturing everyone's attention. Izuku furrowed his brow, wondering what was happening. Ida adjusted his glasses and suggested they find out. They quickened their pace until they reached the circle of students. Izuku's heart raced when Kaminari turned to him, eyes wide with excitement. He pointed to a massive box nearly as tall as Izuku himself, announcing that it was for him. Stammering in disbelief, Izuku was met with Ishido bounding forward, waving a white envelope that had come with the box. Eagerly, Izuku snatched the letter and tore it open, reading aloud to his classmates. The message from Emilia expressed her longing for him and revealed that their father had sent something special. Silence enveloped the group as they processed the letter, and then Izuku's face lit up like fireworks as he rushed toward the box. With frantic hands, he tore the box open, cardboard flying in all directions. As the sides collapsed, a sleek motorcycle painted in black and dark green emerged, a helmet resting proudly on top. Overjoyed, Izuku squealed and embraced the machine as if it were a long-lost friend. His classmates stared in awe. Kirishima marveled at the motorcycle, asking if it was Izuku's. With enthusiasm, Izuku confirmed that it was indeed his and proudly named it the Green Hurricane. From the edge of the group, Uraraka felt relief wash over her, understanding the meaning behind her, in the letter. A familiar voice cut through the excitement, and everyone stiffened as Aizawa approached, his scarf draped lazily around his shoulders. Izuku froze, feeling like a child caught in the act. He nervously explained that his father had a tendency to exaggerate and assured Aizawa he would take the motorcycle home. Aizawa yawned, informing him that there was no rule against students owning vehicles but to clean up the mess. He pointed at the scattered cardboard before walking away. Izuku quickly dropped to gather the pieces, and his classmates joined in, brushing off his apologies with laughter. As they worked, Izuku wondered how such a large box had arrived. Tokoyami explained that they had heard a buzzing sound and saw a helicopter lowering it onto the lawn. The class erupted into disbelief, with 𝐬𝐻 questioning how Izuku's father could arrange such a DLVRY. Izuku laughed nervously, admitting that his father had a knack for overdoing things. His friends joined in laughter, easing the tension. However, 𝐬𝐻 suddenly realized something important and asked when Izuku had time to get a license. Izuku froze, and Kaminari's wide eyes indicated he understood the implication. Nervously, Izuku explained that he had only been learning with his father in England and hadn't taken the exam. He admitted that Japan required a separate license, so he didn't have one. A heavy silence fell over the group as they processed this information. 𝐬𝐻 flatly pointed out that it meant Izuku would be riding illegally. Izuku flailed his arms in protest, insisting he hadn't ridden it yet and had only done so under supervision in England. He promised he would figure it out, eliciting a mix of laughter and exasperation from his classmates. Later, after carefully moving the Green Hurricane into UA's parking lot, Izuku slumped into the common room. He left his phone on the coffee table and wandered into the kitchen for some juice. Just as he took a sip, Kaminari called out that his sister was FaceTiming him. Startled, Izuku rushed back to grab the phone, greeting Emilia with a wide grin. Her face lit up the screen, and she asked if he liked his surprise. Izuku's eyes softened as he glanced at his bike outside, expressing his gratitude for the gift. Emilia noticed something was off and asked where he was, pointing out that it didn't look like his room. Izuku explained he was in the common room with his classmates and offered to let her say hi. Before he could finish, Ishido leaned in with a cheerful greeting. Izuku hesitated but then smiled and angled the phone toward his friends. Emilia's bright voice rang out, complimenting everyone and calling them adorable. The class collectively blushed, flattered by the unexpected praise. Ishido blurted out that Emilia was super pretty, causing laughter among the others. Emilia's smile softened as she thanked them for being such good friends to Izuku, expressing how much it meant to her to know he was surrounded by supportive people. Ida straightened up, assuring her that they would always look out for him. If anything, Midoriya was the one supporting and protecting everyone. Nods rippled through the group, and Izuku felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him. Eventually, he turned the phone back to himself. Amelia's voice softened as she shared her news. Daniel had advanced into her class today. It was his first day. Her grin was wide, perhaps too wide. Izuku expressed his excitement, saying he would text Daniel later to congratulate him. Amelia hesitated before adding that there was something else she wanted to discuss, but it would be better to do so in a more private setting. Izuku frowned slightly but nodded in agreement. Amelia reassured him about his license, suggesting she would talk to her father to arrange a private exam for him. Since he was living in Japan, it made sense to prioritize getting his Japanese license first. Once that was done, they could look into an English one later. Relief flooded Izuku's face as he thanked her, and they shared a warm smile before ending the call. The afternoon continued, the dorm buzzing with its usual life. Izuku, determined to catch up, sought out Ida. He asked if it was a good time to go over some homework. Ida looked genuinely regretful as he explained that urgent matters had come up, and he would have to leave for a while. Izuku waved his hands quickly, assuring Ida not to worry and expressing concern for his well-being. Ida smiled in response, thanking Izuku for his concern before they exchanged goodbyes. Just then, 𝐬𝗏𝗏 chimed in, offering to help him instead. Izuku blinked in surprise but smiled back, grateful for her offer. She blushed slightly as she agreed, and Izuku asked if he could come to her room after grabbing his books. She repeated her agreement, her voice softer this time. Ochako paced her room, wringing her hands as nerves coursed through her. Inviting Deku to study together had seemed casual at first, but now, with her heart fully aware of her feelings for him, it felt like the most reckless decision she had ever made. She tried to steady her breathing, reminding herself to act natural and not to overthink. After gathering her courage, Izuku knocked on her door. They began with English homework, and to their surprise, the nerves melted away as they focused on the books. Ochako patiently guided Izuku through one of present mix exercises, leaning closer to point out a tricky passage. Izuku's face lit up in realization, thanking her for clarifying the lesson. They studied for nearly an hour and a half without any awkward moments, their laughter filling the silence as they enjoyed each other's company. When Ochako leaned back against her bed, she suggested taking a break. Izuku agreed, dropping his pencil and sitting beside her. A comfortable silence enveloped them, and Ochako glanced sideways at him, commenting on how he had changed. He seemed more confident than before. Caught off guard, Izuku asked if that was a bad thing. She laughed softly, assuring him it suited him well. Their conversation drifted into a comfortable quiet, and then, without warning, Ochako's head gently rested against his shoulder. Izuku froze, wide-eyed, before carefully tilting his head to look at her. She was asleep, and his chest warmed at the sight of her peaceful face. He stayed perfectly still, a quiet, content smile forming on his lips. When Izuku blinked awake a few hours later, he realized he had dozed off too. The room was dim, and Ochako was still fast asleep, her head lolling slightly against him. Slowly and gently he shifted out from under her, carefully lifting her smaller frame and tucking her into bed. His face burned with embarrassment as he tiptoed to the door, his heart racing. The next morning, neither he nor 𝐬𝗏𝗏 could meet each other's gaze without turning bright red. Every time their eyes met, they quickly looked away, drawing the attention of their friend, Tenya Ida. He asked if they were feeling all right, and they both replied in unison, just as they had several times that day. Ida, undeterred, adjusted his glasses and revealed he had 3 tickets to Disneyland, inviting them to join him that Sunday. Both teens blinked in surprise, taken aback that their diligent class representative was suggesting something so fun. They blurted out their agreement, glancing at each other, their faces heating up once more. Later that day, as they returned to the dorm building, Tsuyu approached with her arms full of envelopes, dropping them at Izuku's feet. Startled, he asked what they were, and she simply replied they were for him. His name was scrawled across each one, at least 30 letters in total. He muttered to himself that he wouldn't know until he read them all and headed for the elevator. 𝐬𝗏𝗏 called after him, offering help, but he shook his head with a faint smile, assuring her he would manage. Back in his all-mic-covered room, Izuku dropped the stack onto his desk and tore open the first few letters. Each one contained formal greetings, political jargon, and requests for meetings. By the fifth letter, his stomach began to twist with unease. Without hesitation, he reached for his phone and dialed the castle. After a short wait, the familiar voice of Oliver, his father's assistant, answered. Izuku requested to speak to his father. A flurry of movement followed, and Oliver announced that it was Prince Izuku on the line. A moment later, his father's deep voice rumbled through the phone, expressing his happiness to hear from him. Izuku replied that he was fine but needed to discuss something strange that had happened that day. His father's tone sharpened with concern as he asked if Izuku was safe. Izuku reassured him that he was fine but mentioned the 30 letters he had received from different people. They appeared to be British politicians, and somehow, they were aware that Izuku was at UA, even knowing the dorm address. A heavy sigh crackled over the line as Hisashi spoke, expressing his concern. He had wanted to prepare Izuku for the relentless nature of politics, highlighting the corruption that often plagued it. Many would go to great lengths to draw someone with influence to their side. Hisashi had been working to change the system, but he acknowledged that change was slow. Izuku frowned, gripping the phone tighter, unsure of what to do. Hisashi replied firmly, advising him to ignore them. If Izuku didn't engage, they would eventually tire themselves out. Hisashi didn't want him dragged into politics before he was ready, especially while still a student. Izuku quietly accepted this advice. There was a pause before Hisashi's voice softened. He mentioned something unrelated about Izuku's motorcycle license, revealing that he had already arranged a private exam for the next day. The paperwork and license were ready, Izuku just needed to pass the test. Stunned, Izuku realized how quickly everything was happening. Hisashi chuckled, explaining that this was the fastest way to obtain a Japanese license since Izuku was living there. With determination sparking in his eyes, Izuku felt that this opportunity was perfect. He promised to pass the test. The next day, the testing grounds were quieter than Izuku had expected. There were no bustling lines of nervous students, just a single instructor in a crisp uniform with a clipboard, and the gleaming figure of the Green Hurricane waiting at the edge of the course. Adjusting his helmet, Izuku took a deep breath, reminding himself that he had faced villains and fought for his dreams. This was just a driving test. The proctor raised an eyebrow, confirming Izuku's identity. Flinching at the title, Izuku nodded quickly. The course was challenging, with tight turns, sudden stops, and narrow lanes designed to test precision. At first, nerves threatened to overwhelm him, but as soon as the Green Hurricane roared to life, muscle memory from his father's training took over. He navigated the course with increasing confidence, impressing the proctor. When the test concluded, Izuku pulled up beside the examiner, breathing inside his helmet, eager to know how he had performed. The man smirked as he flipped his clipboard shut, congratulating Izuku for passing on the first try, a feat few managed. Izuku's heart soared with joy, and he celebrated his success with a fist pump. Later that afternoon, when Izuku returned to the dorm, he carried his helmet under one arm, his grin wide. Kaminari noticed first, asking about his cheerful demeanor. Izuku shyly revealed that he had passed his motorcycle license exam, holding up the brand-new license. The common room erupted in excitement, with his friends congratulating him and expressing their eagerness for a ride. As the day went on, Izuku found himself pulling a thick stack of envelopes from the dormitory postbox. 𝐀𝐮𝐿 raised an eyebrow, curious about the growing number of letters. Izuku sighed, dropping the pile on the dining table and rubbing his temples. When Todoroki offered to burn the discarded letters, Izuku hesitated, wanting to check for anything important first. Uraraka joined him, offering to help sort through the envelopes. After rifling through them, Izuku confirmed that nothing significant was included, though he appreciated her assistance. Meanwhile, Todoroki calmly incinerated the discarded letters, commenting on the increasing volume of correspondence. Izuku expressed concern about the piling letters, unsure how to handle the situation. Ida entered just in time to share his own experiences with similar issues, making Izuku feel less alone. The conversation grew heavy until Uraraka suggested they focus on their plans for the day. However, Ida had to bow out due to an urgent matter, leaving Izuku and Uraraka to go without him. Though disappointed, Izuku agreed to accompany her. As they prepared to leave, Izuku suggested taking the train or his motorcycle. Uraraka hesitated, admitting she had never been on a motorcycle before. Izuku tried to sound confident, assuring her that it would be a fun experience and a faster way to reach Disneyland. In the parking lot, Uraraka fidgeted as Izuku handed her the spare helmet, expressing her apprehension. Izuku reassured her, sliding their bags into the storage hatch, ready for their adventure. It wasn't nearly as bad as some of the rides at Disneyland. She let out a light laugh, acknowledging the truth in his words. He offered to help her with the helmet straps, noticing her struggle. Her cheeks flushed as she accepted his assistance. As Izuku leaned in to adjust the helmet, both felt a rush of warmth. She quietly expressed her gratitude, and he quickly averted his gaze. He encouraged her to hop on, his voice a bit higher than usual. As they sped off toward Tokyo, his heart raced faster than the engine, with his crush holding onto him tightly from behind. Once they arrived at Disneyland, Uraraka was filled with excitement as she dismounted the bike. She exclaimed that the ride was much more enjoyable than she had anticipated. Izuku smiled sheepishly while locking up the bike, pleased to see her enthusiasm. Inside the park, they were enveloped by music, twinkling lights, and the joyful chaos of families and friends. Izuku felt his nerves dissipate as he asked what she wanted to do first. Uraraka, overwhelmed by the sights, spun around, her eyes sparkling with wonder. She pointed to a roller coaster, and he readily agreed. For the next few hours, they dashed from ride to ride, laughing and screaming in delight. Izuku was so immersed in the fun that he forgot to analyze every attraction as he usually did. After stumbling out of their fifth ride, Uraraka slipped her hand into his. He froze, surprised by the warmth of her small fingers entwined with his. She stammered that it was only so they wouldn't get separated in the crowd, her cheeks glowing. Izuku's grin widened, his own face turning a deep shade of red, but he nodded in agreement. Later, they paused for churros, and Izuku insisted on paying. As they sat on a bench, enjoying the sweet treat, he blurted out that his dad would really like her. Uraraka's eyes widened in surprise, and he explained that his father appreciated humble, kind, and energetic people. Realizing how personal his comments sounded, he felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him. Her blush deepened, but she smiled, taking it as a compliment. Izuku's face turned crimson as he admitted he liked those qualities about her too, stumbling over his words. The silence that followed was thick with tension until Uraraka broke it with a laugh, assuring him he hadn't said anything bad. Relieved, Izuku chuckled and asked what they should do next. She declared it was time for shopping, stating she wouldn't get on another ride until her stomach calmed down. They wandered through the souvenir shops, with Uraraka proudly modeling a mini headband while Izuku wore matching Mickey ears. His embarrassment faded as he watched her smile. As dusk settled and the park lights sparkled like stars, Izuku suggested one last activity before leaving. He spotted the glowing Ferris wheel and proposed it, mentioning the amazing view. Uraraka's smile widened in agreement, and they decided to end the day there. Once seated in the gently swaying car of the Ferris wheel, Tokyo sprawled beneath them like a field of stars. Izuku felt his palms grow sweaty, battling the urge to confess his feelings. Each time he opened his mouth, his courage faltered, and he filled the silence with awkward comments about the skyline and the rides. As they stepped off, he felt the moment slip away, his shoulders slumping in disappointment. They walked slowly through the lantern-lit park toward the exit, neither speaking until Uraraka finally stopped. Turning to him, her cheeks flushed pink, she expressed her gratitude for the day, calling it one of the best she had ever experienced. Taking a deep breath, she met his gaze with determination and confessed her feelings for him. Izuku froze, his mind racing as her words sank in. For a moment, he thought he had misheard, but the warmth in her eyes confirmed it. The distant fireworks began, but to him, the only explosion that mattered was the one in his chest. He stammered, asking if she really liked him. Uraraka's face turned as red as his, but she nodded, confirming her feelings in a romantic way. For a moment, Izuku thought he might faint. His hands trembled as he blurted out that he liked her too, just as strongly. They both froze, staring at each other in shock before quickly looking away, their faces burning. Unsure of what to do next, Izuku scratched the back of his neck, and Uraraka admitted she didn't know either, letting out a nervous laugh. He risked a glance at her. She was still smiling, soft yet sure. Hesitantly, he reached out and took her hand, feeling her fingers curl around his. The warmth of their connection made them blush even harder. When they finally reached his bike outside the park gates, the air was cool and the sky was alive with distant fireworks. Uraraka gently tugged at his sleeve, wanting to clarify something. Panic rose in him as he wondered if he had misunderstood her feelings. But she quickly reassured him, smiling despite her nerves, confirming that she liked him in a romantic way. Relief washed over him, and he nearly swayed on his feet. After a brief pause, he asked if he could hug her. Uraraka's heart raced at his request. Her smile grew warm and a little teary as she agreed. He wrapped his arms around her, and she sank into his embrace, both holding on tightly, afraid to let go. After a long moment, Uraraka's voice was muffled against his shoulder as she asked if they could be boyfriend and girlfriend. Izuku pulled back just enough to look at her, his face aflame, and eagerly agreed. Her giggle bubbled out, and before he could react, she hugged him again, burying her face in his shoulder. The ride back to UA was quiet, yet filled with unspoken feelings. With her arms wrapped around his waist, Uraraka felt every shift of Izuku's muscles as he navigated the bike with care. The night air rushed past them, but all she noticed was his warmth. Though the helmet concealed her blush, she knew her face was burning. Izuku, on the other hand, felt as if his heart might burst. She likes me. She's holding on to me. He gripped the handlebars tighter, determined to make every turn smoothly. Halfway back, her voice broke through the wind. She mentioned that now that they were dating, it felt strange to keep calling him by his hero name. Hesitating, she asked if she could call him Izuku instead. His chest tightened with happiness as he eagerly agreed. He expressed his excitement, his voice cracking slightly, but the happiness was unmistakable. Uraraka giggled against his back, feeling a rush of joy. When she said his name, it made her giddy. He swallowed hard, trying to suppress a grin while driving, and decided to call her 𝐻𝐿. The way her name rolled off his tongue made her heart race, and she hugged him a little tighter, whispering her approval. By the time they reached the dorms, a new energy filled the air between them, something tender and delicate, yet very real. Both of them removed their helmets, their hair slightly tousled from the ride. At the door, 𝐻𝐿 hesitated, her hand brushing against his sleeve and lingering there. She looked down, shuffling her feet, and asked if they could keep their connection just between them for now. She explained that she wasn't ashamed, but if the other girls found out, they would bombard her with questions. Izuku blinked, then smiled gently, assuring her that he understood and they could take things at her pace. Her shoulders relaxed, and she let out a soft laugh, thanking him. He responded warmly, saying he would respect her comfort level. 𝐻𝐿 nodded, quickly adding that he could still call her 𝐻𝐿, as it would make their relationship feel more real. He chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck, and they made a promise to each other. As they stepped inside, Ashido's playful voice echoed, teasing them about their whereabouts. Both of them froze, their faces turning bright red. 𝐻𝐿 quickly blurted out that they had just gone to Disneyland, and Izuku scrambled to add that Ida was supposed to join them but couldn't make it. Ashido squinted suspiciously but smirked, expressing her longing to be the first to know when they officially started dating. As she skipped away, Izuku and 𝐻𝐿 exchanged a glance, both struggling to contain their laughter, thinking about how oblivious she was. The next morning, reality set in with homeroom. Aizawa slouched at the front of the class, already wrapped in his sleeping bag. He informed them that finals were approaching, both written and practical, and warned them not to fail. He scribbled the exam schedule on the board and announced that the annual sports festival had been moved to the start of the next year, advising them to prepare over spring break before dismissing them. Izuku tapped his pencil against his notebook, his thoughts racing. Finals, the sports festival, and now 𝐻𝐿 filled his mind. His heart fluttered. For once, his nerves were not solely about exams. Upon arriving at his mother's apartment, he slipped off his shoes and asked if she had packed anything yet. poked her head out of the kitchen, sheepishly admitting she had started but still had plenty of time. He laughed, reminding her that she was leaving for England in 3 days, which wasn't exactly plenty of time. She scratched her cheek nervously, chuckling that he sounded just like his father. Later, as they sat together in the living room sharing snacks, Inko noticed the nervous way he rubbed the back of his neck while watching TV. She commented on his good mood but sensed something was off and pressed him about it. Izuku's laughter faded as he realized she could see right through him. He sighed, cheeks warming, and finally admitted that he had gotten a girlfriend. Inko froze for a moment, her eyes widening in surprise, before fainting. When she came to, she found herself on the couch with a blanket over her legs, the smell of simmering tomatoes wafting from the kitchen. Confused, she asked what happened, and Izuku explained that she had fainted after he shared his news. He looked worried, asking if she was against him having a girlfriend. She quickly reassured him that she was just surprised, her heart not ready for such news, but she was happy for him as long as his girlfriend was a good person. Relief washed over Izuku as he dished pasta into bowls, feeling grateful for her support. Later, as they sat down to eat, Inko noticed her son tense up again and asked what was wrong. He sighed, explaining that he had promised Ochako they wouldn't tell anyone yet, but he couldn't lie when she asked. Inko understood and encouraged him to be honest with Ochako, assuring him that she would understand. A week later, Izuku sat cross-legged on Ochako's dorm room floor, textbooks open between them, but his mind was elsewhere. When she asked if something was wrong, he hesitated before confessing that he had told his mom about their relationship, despite their agreement to wait. Guilt weighed heavily on him as he spoke. Ochako reached out, squeezing his hand and thanking him for his honesty. Surprised, he asked if she was mad, but she smiled and said she was happy that their relationship was important enough to share with his family. Encouraged, he asked if she would like to visit England with him during spring break. Her eyes widened with excitement, but she expressed concern about affording a ticket. He quickly assured her that his dad would cover it, mentioning that his father had a private jet. Ochako froze in disbelief, asking who his dad was. Izuku hesitated before pulling out his phone to show her, eager to share this part of his life with her. Ochako leaned closer, nearly dropping her phone. The message displayed the royal family of Great Britain, His Royal Highness King 𝐻𝐼𝐶, Her Royal Highness Queen Inko Windsor, Her Royal Highness Princess Amelia Windsor, and His Royal Highness Prince Izuku Windsor. Her jaw dropped in disbelief. Izuku, feeling nervous, confirmed her thoughts, admitting he had hidden his royal identity for too long. Silence stretched between them until she finally asked if anyone else knew. He replied that only the principal, Mr. Aizawa, All Might, and now she knew. Ochako exhaled slowly, and to his surprise, she smiled. The title of prince seemed to amuse her. Flustered, he rubbed the back of his neck as she grinned and teased that it meant he was really rich. He laughed and nodded sheepishly. However, the realization hit her, and her face turned scarlet as she apologized, saying that her love for him was more important than any wealth that came with his title. Izuku's blush deepened, but his smile remained warm as he reassured her that he loved every side of her. Her heart raced, but doubt crept in as she worried about his family's acceptance. She felt inadequate, not coming from money or being at the top of her class. Izuku gently pulled her into his arms, murmuring that his family was not a perfect fairy tale but just people. To him, she was the most appealing and kind-hearted person he knew, and he felt lucky to be with her. She melted into his chest, whispering that she was the lucky one. After a moment, Izuku pulled back slightly, grinning as he asked if she would come with him to England. Ochako hesitated, and he added playfully that they would be living in a palace with all the royal treatment. She laughed, poking his chest and teasing that he would need to convince her dad first. Izuku froze at the mention of her father, and she giggled at his panicked expression, explaining that he would need her father's approval to take her across the world. Later, Ochako greeted her mother on the phone, feeling nervous as she sat beside Izuku, who was equally tense. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision to ask her parents if she could bring someone home. She took a deep breath and asked if she could bring someone home the next day. Her mother responded positively, inquiring if it was a classmate. Izuku listened intently, sensing the weight of the moment. Ochako hesitated before revealing that she had been dating someone for a while and wanted her parents to meet him. Her mother squealed in excitement, nearly causing Izuku to fall off the bed. After a brief commotion, Ochako learned that her father had fainted at the news. The couple exchanged worried glances, realizing that convincing him would not be easy. Ochako sighed, feeling the pressure of the situation, but Izuku reassured her that they would get through it together. The next afternoon, as they prepared to leave, Ashido caught them at the dorm doors, questioning where they were going. Both Izuku and Ochako felt a wave of nervousness wash over them. Ochako quickly pushed Izuku through the door, promising to explain later. Once outside, Izuku chuckled, but Ochako felt she had messed up and would have to tell them the truth. As they walked hand in hand to the parking lot, Ochako felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. When they arrived at her parents' home, Izuku's nerves intensified. He took a deep breath, admitting to Ochako that he was nervous. She squeezed his hand for reassurance before ringing the doorbell. Mrs. Uraraka greeted them with a warm smile, while Mr. Uraraka's stern expression made Izuku's heart race. Once inside, they settled into the living room, the atmosphere thick with tension. Mrs. Uraraka broke the silence, asking for Izuku's name. He straightened up, palms sweating, and introduced himself as Izuku Midoriya Windsor, the Prince of Great Britain. Mrs. Uraraka blinked in surprise, while Mr. Uraraka burst into laughter, thinking it was a joke. Izuku insisted he was serious, and Ochako confirmed that she had only recently learned of his royal status. The room fell silent until Mrs. Uraraka squealed in excitement, but Mr. Uraraka's voice was firm as he stated that Izuku would need to prove himself if he wanted to date his daughter. Taking a deep breath, Izuku met Mr. Uraraka's gaze, his chest tightening as he declared that he loved Ochako and would never hurt her. He had come to ask for his blessing. The room grew still, and Ochako squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with warmth, but her father's expression remained unyielding. Mr. Uraraka leaned forward, his voice sharp as he questioned the sincerity of Izuku's feelings. Izuku felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him as Mr. Uraraka challenged him about love and protection. Every instinct urged him to retreat, to overthink as he often did. Instead, he stood tall and expressed his thoughts. He acknowledged that he didn't know everything, but as aspiring heroes, it was their duty to protect others unconditionally. He shared how he had risked his life for friends and even for Ochako, vowing that he would do it again without hesitation, standing between her and any threat. Mr. Uraraka blinked, taken aback by Izuku's conviction, but quickly regained his composure, deepening his frown. He reminded Izuku that relationships required patience, respect, and years of effort, questioning whether he possessed those qualities. Izuku nodded firmly, admitting he had much to learn and would likely make mistakes. However, he expressed his longing to grow alongside Ochako and be someone she could rely on, not just as a hero but as a partner. His honesty flowed as he described her kindness, strength, and the inspiration she brought to his life, assuring Mr. Uraraka that he would never take her for granted and would strive to be worthy of her. Ochako felt her cheeks warm, while her mother watched with a hand over her mouth, clearly moved by Izuku's heartfelt declaration. Mr. Uraraka scrutinized Izuku for a long moment, causing sweat to trickle down Izuku's back, but he remained steady, refusing to look away. Finally, Mr. Uraraka acknowledged Izuku's courage, but warned that actions mattered more than words. He made it clear that if Izuku ever caused Ochako pain or prioritized his ambitions over her happiness, he would have to answer to him. Izuku swallowed hard and affirmed his understanding. After a tense silence, Mr. Uraraka relented, stating he would allow the relationship but that Izuku would need to prove himself daily. A wave of relief washed over Izuku as he thanked Mr. Uraraka, promising to do his best. Ochako's radiant smile lightened the atmosphere. Lunch provided a welcome distraction, featuring simple grilled fish, miso soup, and rice. To Izuku, it tasted better than anything he had enjoyed in weeks, perhaps because his nerves were finally settling. Mrs. Uraraka engaged him in friendly conversation, asking about school, training, and his favorite foods. Izuku responded earnestly, occasionally stumbling over his words, which made Ochako giggle. Mr. Uraraka sat across from him, observing with narrowed eyes, but his glare had softened to a more watchful demeanor. Ochako nudged Izuku under the table, encouraging him to seize the moment. Clearing his throat, he gathered his courage and addressed her parents directly, asking for their permission to take Ochako to England during spring break. The ensuing silence felt heavy, and Izuku pressed on, assuring them of Ochako's safety with their travel plans, which included a private jet and security. He promised to protect her with everything he had. As he rambled on, trying to reassure them further, Ochako discreetly pinched his arm to stop him. Mrs. Uraraka exchanged glances with her husband, who finally responded, indicating that it sounded safe enough. After a prolonged silence, Mr. Uraraka agreed, but with one condition: they would not share a room. Izuku nearly choked on his rice, his face turning crimson as he hurriedly affirmed his understanding. Ochako buried her face in her hands, her cheeks flushed, while Mrs. Uraraka chuckled softly at the scene. Once outside, the cool spring air felt refreshing against Izuku's heated face. Just as he exhaled in relief, Ochako embraced him tightly, whispering that he was the best boyfriend ever. Her warmth melted away the tension he had held throughout the day. Before he could respond, she leaned in and kissed his cheek, causing his heart to race and his face to heat up even more. Pulling back slightly, she looked into his eyes and confessed her love for him, not because of his status as a hero or a prince, but for the person he was, the one who overthinks and tries so hard. She added that while being a prince had its perks, it was his genuine self that she cherished. Izuku leaned his forehead against her shoulder, his voice muffled but filled with emotion as he reciprocated her feelings. Gathering his courage, he asked if he could kiss her on the lips. Ochako froze momentarily, her eyes wide, before her cheeks flushed as she nodded in agreement. Nervously, they leaned closer. Izuku brushed a strand of her hair behind her ear, his hand trembling. With all the courage he could muster, he pressed a quick kiss to her lips. Time seemed to stand still as they pulled back, both flushed and grinning like fools, caught in the moment of their shared affection. Where had Ochako and Midori been sneaking off to these past few weeks? Ishido leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. After dinner, the girls of Class 1A had gathered in the common room, surrounding Ochako like a pack of eager wolves. Izuku had slipped upstairs to call his sister, leaving Ochako alone in the spotlight. "Yeah, Ochako, tell us everything," Hagakure exclaimed, her invisible arms waving for emphasis. "Tell you everything." Yaoyorozu frowned, glancing down at the delicate porcelain cup in her hands. No, she means share your secrets," Tsuyu explained, calm as ever. Yaoyorozu blinked in realization. "Oh. Anyway," Ishido interrupted, practically bouncing with impatience. "Well." All the girls looked at Ochako, their eyes wide with anticipation. Ochako's fingers twisted together in her lap. "You just been studying in our dorms. You know, finals are coming up." Ishido narrowed her eyes. "I've read enough school romance manga to know what studying alone with a boy really means." For a moment, Ochako just blinked at her. Then her brain caught up, and her entire face turned bright red. No. It's not like that," she exclaimed, flapping her hands as if to swat away their assumptions. Ju, leaning back on a stool, smirked. "I believe her. Midoriya doesn't have the guts to make a move on a girl anyway." Ochako's brief relief evaporated when Ishido leaned in again. "Then what about today, huh?" The room went still, and Ochako's heart raced. She hated lying, these were her best friends. Taking a shaky breath, she confessed, "Actually, we went to my parents' house." The collective gasp from the girls was so loud that even the boys across the room turned their heads. "And?" Hagakure demanded. "What happened?" Ochako stammered, heat rushing to her face. She. He what?" Ishido cried out in frustration. Ochako squeezed her eyes shut. "He asked for my dad's permission to date me," she blurted in one breath. For a moment, silence reigned. Then the room erupted. The girls shrieked and swarmed her, hugging her from all sides. "Ochako, I'm so happy for you." Ishido squealed, squeezing her so tightly that she could barely breathe. Across the room, the boys finally pieced it together. "Wait, Midoriya and Uraraka are dating. Kaminari shouted. No way. Those two. Kirishima laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. The commotion continued when the elevator doors opened, and Izuku stepped out, blinking in confusion. Why was everyone staring at him? Congrats, bro. Kirishima and Kaminari clapped him HRD on the back. Shut. Izuku managed. Uraraka told us you got her dad's permission. Well, we just happened to hear while she was telling the girls. Regardless, so manly of you. Kirishima grinned. Ochako hurried over, her cheeks still pink. I'm sorry, Izuku. I couldn't lie to them. Izuku exhaled and gave her a gentle smile. It's okay. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Can I talk to you real quick? They slipped to a quiet corner, though Ashido couldn't resist shouting across the room. If you hurt her, Midori, I'll personally make sure you regret it. I won't. Izuku yelped, his face scarlet. Ochako muffled a laugh behind her hand. So, what did you want to talk about? I talked with Emilia, Izuku said softly. I asked her to arrange a jet. I told her I'm bringing someone, but not who. I thought, maybe it could be a surprise. But if you don't like that, I can tell them right away that I'm bringing my girlfriend. He blushed a little deeper when he said, my girlfriend. Ochako froze, her stomach swooping. Meeting his family was one thing. Meeting his royal family was another. How does one even greet a king and a queen? She nodded slowly. That's fine, Izuku. Thank you. But inside, her nerves twisted tighter than ever. Izuku smiled gently, his eyes soft with affection. If you need anything, please tell me. And please don't be too nervous. My parents and sister are really kind. Ochako simply returned his smile and nodded in response. As Izuku and Ochako returned from their private conversation, all eyes zeroed in on them like lasers. So, Ashido smirked. What did you two lovebirds talk about? Ochako opened her mouth, but no words came out. Izuku, red from ear to ear, rubbed the back of his neck. Just plans for spring break. Oh, Kaminari commented. Plans? Sounds like a romantic getaway. Kaminari, Yaoyorozu scolded gently, though even she was hiding a small smile behind her teacup. Izuku glanced at Ochako, silently pleading for backup. But the brunette was just as pink as he was. She let out a nervous laugh and discreetly reached for his hand. It was just a small squeeze, but Izuku's entire face lit up. Their classmates immediately noticed. Hand-holding. Ashido gasped, pointing dramatically as if she had just discovered a crime scene. Scandalous, Jar deadpanned, though a faint grin tugged at her lips. Ah, don't tease them too much, Kirishima said, elbowing Kaminari. It's very manly that Midoriya actually asked her parents first. True, 𝐬𝐿 agreed. Though I still can't believe Uraraka's dad didn't break him in half. Izuku shook his head. Had I been alone with him, I would have probably been in serious trouble. A shiver ran through him at the thought of being left alone with his girlfriend's dad. His classmates erupted into laughter, which made Izuku smile slightly, despite the memories of the intense glares and interrogation. Ochako laughed along, despite her embarrassment. The teasing continued, bouncing from classmate to classmate, until Izuku finally blurted out, See, can you all please stop making it sound like such a big deal? The room quieted for a moment. Then Ashido grinned. It is a big deal. You two are literally the most wholesome couple ever. Ochako ducked her head, smiling into her lap. Izuku looked like he might combust on the spot, but he didn't let go of her hand. If anything, his fingers curled more firmly around hers. Aizawa's voice suddenly drifted in from the hallway. Keep it down. Some of us would like to pretend this dorm isn't a soap opera. The room exploded with laughter, and Ochako leaned her shoulder against Izuku's for the first time in front of everyone. He stiffened but then slowly relaxed, allowing himself to rest against her too. For the first time, it didn't feel so scary to be seen. 2 weeks later, finals were in full swing. The written exams were already done, and Ochako walked out of those feeling confident, while Izuku felt less so. Now came the practicals, which tested not just strength but judgment under pressure. In the monitoring room, Izuku fidgeted so much that his nails nearly cut into his palms. He couldn't sit still, couldn't stop leaning toward the screens as if that would somehow keep her safe. On the main feed, Ochako and 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐴 faced their assignment. 30 civilians, trapped in a collapsing high-rise. "This is tough," Present Mike muttered, unusually subdued. "Understatement," Aizawa replied flatly, though even he didn't appear as detached as usual. On the screen, Ochako's chin lifted, her voice nervous but firm. "Okay, everyone. I know it's scary, but we're going to get you out. Please stay calm." "Rooftop," 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐴 urged, quick and steady. "We can combine our quirks." The pair herded the civilians upward through stairwells that shook with every groan of steel. Chunks of plaster fell around them, and dust filled the air. By the time they pushed through the final door, the roof pitched dangerously, the entire structure teetering like a card tower in the wind. Ochako insisted that 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐴 go first, already activating her quirk. Her hands trembled as she made her partner float down to the rooftop of the building across the street. The distance between the two buildings was about 6 meters, but the other one was several floors lower. Izuku pressed his fists against his knees so hard they ached, mouthing encouragement to Ochako, urging her to believe in herself. One by one, citizens floated into the air, their frightened cries echoing through the feed, but each landed safely as 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐴's tongue guided them down. Relief flickered across Izuku's face until the roof gave a deafening crack, the tilt nearly throwing Ochako off her feet. 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐴's urgent voice rang through the transponder, insisting they bring the rest over all at once. Ochako froze for a heartbeat, then squeezed her eyes shut, reminding herself of the training. Her legs carried her before her mind caught up. She darted across the unstable roof, brushing shoulders and tagging civilians as quickly as she could. 17 people lifted, their bodies bobbing in the air like balloons. Sweat ran into her eyes, and her knees nearly buckled under the strain. Her quirk pulled at her stomach like 1,000 lead weights. "Just a few more meters," she whispered to herself. Her vision swam, dark spots creeping in. Then 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐴's voice rang through the earpiece, confirming that they were safe after securing them with her tongue. Ochako crumpled to her knees, her chest heaving. For a moment, relief swelled within her until a high-pitched cry cut through the air. Her head whipped around to see a little girl, no more than 4, standing at the far edge of the roof, tears in her cheeks. She sobbed for her mother. Ochako's heart sank. How had she missed her? The siren hadn't rung, of course, not until every last person was safe. "It's okay," she murmured, forcing calm as she scooped the girl into her arms. She tapped the child's shoulder and herself, her quirk activating as they floated shakily over the edge. Izuku's nails dug crescents into his palms, whispering encouragement to himself. Then 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐴's scream split the air, warning Ochako to look out. Ochako twisted midair just in time to see a massive window frame, ripped free by the collapsing structure, spinning toward her like a blade. Her pulse spiked. There was no time. She shouted for 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐴 to catch the child, throwing the girl with every ounce of strength left in her arms. 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐴's tongue snapped out, securing the girl safely, but Ochako had no chance to dodge. Izuku jolted as the screen erupted in smoke and debris. The last thing visible was Ochako's silhouette swallowed by the collapsing building before the feed dissolved into gray dust. Panic washed over him as he rushed across the monitoring room, his voice filled with concern as he called out to her. Ochako raised her good arm with an exasperated sigh, assuring him she was fine, that it was just a scratch. The cut along her forearm was shallow, but the way Izuku's eyes widened, one would think she had suffered a serious injury. His worry was palpable as he reached for her arm, but she pulled back stubbornly, insisting she was fine. The sudden snap in her voice startled both of them. They had never truly raised their voices at each other before, and the silence that followed was heavy, their classmates watching the scene unfold. Izuku clenched his jaw, then without another word, he scooped her up into his arms. Ochako yelped in protest, demanding he put her down, but he was determined to take her to Recovery Girl. Behind them, Ishido called out playfully, teasing them as laughter erupted across the monitoring room. Bakugou muttered under his breath, but oddly enough, since Izuku and Ochako had started dating, he seemed less explosive toward Izuku. No one dared to bring it up, though. A few minutes later, in Recovery Girl's office, 𝐻𝐼𝐶 lay under a blanket on the infirmary bed, still pouting at Izuku's overreaction. Recovery Girl adjusted her glasses, smiling as she explained that 𝐻𝐼𝐶 had simply overused her quirk and needed rest. Izuku exhaled in relief, though he still hovered protectively at her bedside. 𝐻𝐼𝐶 gently reassured him that a nap would suffice, and as he tucked the blanket around her, he pressed a light kiss to her forehead, promising to return after finishing his exam. 𝐻𝐼𝐶 blinked at him, her pout dissolving into a sleepy smile as she began to drift off. Later, when she opened her eyes again, she found Izuku beside her, brushing a stray strand of hair from her forehead. His green eyes softened upon meeting hers. He apologized for waking her and shared the success of his exam, explaining how he and Tokoyami had worked together to save everyone faster than expected. 𝐻𝐼𝐶 couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. When he finally paused for breath, she leaned forward and kissed his cheek, whispering her pride in him. Izuku's face turned red, but his grin was unstoppable. A few days later, as finals week ended, the class was exhausted. They sprawled in the common room, and 𝐻𝐼𝐶 sat beside Izuku, chewing on her pencil as she tried to make a packing checklist. She dramatically complained about not knowing what to pack, slumping against his shoulder. Without looking up from his phone, he reassured her not to stress, suggesting that 16 outfits should be enough. 𝐻𝐼𝐶 interrupted, exclaiming her disbelief at how she could possibly gather that many clothes. A snicker came from across the room, and Ishido leaned forward with a grin, teasing them about their plans. Both Izuku and 𝐻𝐼𝐶 froze, caught in the moment. The room's attention shifted toward them like a spotlight. 𝐻𝐼𝐶 admitted, feeling a bit shy, that they were going to England. Jiru raised an eyebrow, a faint smile on her face as she questioned how they could be traveling together after only a month of dating. Izuku stammered, rubbing the back of his neck, explaining that it hadn't been easy, but 𝐻𝐼𝐶's dad had given them permission. Ishido leaned closer to 𝐻𝐼𝐶, excitedly asking how she felt about meeting Izuku's family. 𝐻𝐼𝐶 lowered her voice, her cheeks warming as she confessed to feeling more nervous than ever. Izuku smiled reassuringly, promising her that there was nothing to worry about. He then got distracted by his phone, sharing that he had already spoken to his dad and Emilia about their trip. The maids and butlers were preparing her room so she wouldn't have to lift a finger, and his mom was already there, though he wasn't sure how things were between her and his dad. He urged her not to stress, assuring her that everything would be fine. He also mentioned that his dad had sent photos of a few jets and that they needed to choose one soon for their departure. 𝐻𝐼𝐶 interrupted him, tugging at his sleeve, reminding him that he was rambling again, which made her cheeks flush once more. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned toward them. Realizing what he had let slip, Izuku laughed nervously and rubbed the back of his neck. Jiru muttered that she had thought Yamamoto was the rich one, while Kaminari joked about Izuku talking about private jets like they were taxis, questioning if he was royalty. Izuku froze, feeling a rush of embarrassment, while 𝐻𝐼𝐶 forced a shaky laugh, clarifying that his dad was just really rich. Some classmates chuckled and nodded, letting it pass, but Ishido leaned in with a playful grin, teasing about their quick trip to England. Izuku ducked his head, his cheeks turning scarlet as he insisted it wasn't like that. They just wanted to make the most of spring break. Ishido teased further, suggesting it was serious, which made 𝐻𝐼𝐶 groan and cover her face with her notepad, asking her to stop. Eventually, the attention shifted elsewhere, and the common room noise returned to normal. Discreetly, 𝐻𝐼𝐶 reached for Izuku's hand and squeezed it tightly. He glanced at her in surprise, and she met his gaze with a small, reassuring smile, silently promising to protect his secret. Izuku squeezed her hand back, feeling a sense of relief for the first time since Kaminari's careless joke. A couple of days later, Yue's end-of-year ceremony arrived, bringing the whole school together to celebrate. For Izuku, it also meant saying goodbye to the graduating third years. Although he knew this day was coming, seeing Tohigata-senpai standing proudly on stage brought tears to his eyes. After everything they had been through together, he couldn't help but cry. When he approached Tohigata to congratulate him, he found himself sobbing harder than the seniors. 𝐻𝐼𝐶 murmured comforting words, patting his back like she had done many times before, even holding a tissue up to his nose. 𝗀𝗏𝗘 laughed warmly at the sight, joking that they looked more like mother and son than a couple. Ochako giggled, shrugging that when your boyfriend was a crybaby, someone had to play the mom role. Izuku didn't deny it, secretly wishing he could be more composed. After the goodbyes, Ochako leaned in close, mentioning she was going shopping with Mina for a few things before their trip. She gave him a quick kiss on the cheek and left with 𝐻𝗕𝗏. Shortly after, Izuku's phone buzzed, and he quickly answered his dad's call, asking about how they would travel with his bike. His dad informed him that he was sending an RV to the school, which had a garage in the back for the bike. Izuku was impressed, realizing his dad had thought of everything, and he laughed, thanking him. When the call ended, Izuku returned to packing. His last trip to England had been to meet family, but this time, his father mentioned public appearances. Izuku was unsure what kind, perhaps charity or press events, but he couldn't help but stress pack half his wardrobe just in case. About 2 hours later, Ochako returned, her arms filled with shopping bags. Izuku quickly offered to help her carry them, and she gratefully handed him a few bags. She teased 𝐻𝗕𝗏 about the benefits of having a boyfriend, which made Izuku chuckle as they entered the elevator. He asked if she had much left to pack, to which she replied it was just the items she had bought that day. He informed her that his dad's RV should arrive in about an hour, easing her worries about transporting the bike and their luggage. After dropping her bags in her room, Izuku excused himself to finish packing. He carried his suitcases down first and decided to make milkshakes as a surprise for Ochako. Although it proved to be more challenging than expected, he eventually managed to create an Oreo shake for himself and a strawberry one for her. As he was cleaning up, Ochako appeared, and he shyly handed her the drink. Her face lit up, and she leaned in to kiss his cheek, thanking him and calling him the best, which made him blush instantly. Moments later, with their luggage in tow, they made their way toward UA's front gate, where their classmates called out goodbyes. Ida humorously reminded them to avoid any indecent acts until they were older, causing both Izuku and Ochako to turn scarlet and stumble over their steps as they hurried out. When they reached the gate, the RV had not yet arrived. Izuku left the suitcases with Ochako and told her to wait while he went to get his bike from the lot. She nodded, a bit nervous, as he jogged off. 5 minutes later, the RV pulled up, large, sleek, and intimidating for Ochako's taste. 2 men in black tuxedos and sunglasses stepped out, one of them asking if she was His Highness' companion. She nodded, feeling her throat tighten as they inquired about her bags. When she pointed to her pink suitcases, they informed her that they needed to inspect her belongings for the prince's safety. Panic surged within her as one of them reached for her purse, and she clutched it tightly, feeling overwhelmed. Ochako felt a surge of frustration as the man pressed her, insisting that her refusal to let them search her belongings made her look suspicious. She shook her head vigorously, her eyes stinging with the thought of them going through her things, especially her personal items. Before she could voice her protest again, a furious voice cut through the air. Izuku hurried over, pulling his bike along. Ochako stepped closer to him, explaining that they wanted to search through her belongings. Izuku's expression turned serious as he narrowed his eyes. He instructed her to go inside the RV, assuring her that he would handle the situation. Once she was safely inside, he confronted the guards. He questioned their judgment, making it clear that he would never bring someone untrustworthy with him. His voice trembled with restrained anger as he declared that they had overstepped their bounds and were fired. The guards stammered excuses, but he silenced them with a fierce glare, informing them that they would keep their posts until they reached the palace, after which they would be dismissed. When Izuku climbed into the RV, Ochako looked at him with pure admiration. She had overheard everything and thought he was incredibly cool. Izuku softened at the sight of her, apologizing for leaving her alone and gently kissing her cheek, which made her nerves melt away. The rest of the evening passed in a blur as they navigated airport security, boarded carts to the runway, and finally approached the gleaming jet. Ochako gasped in awe, noting that it was even bigger than in the pictures. Izuku smiled at her reaction, feeling a sense of pride. As they stepped aboard, the pilot bowed, expressing his honor in flying them. Izuku thanked him politely and guided Ochako inside, where she clung to him, feeling overwhelmed. They settled into wide leather seats, and Ochako texted her mom before takeoff, sharing their excitement. As the engines roared to life, they ascended into the sky, heading toward England and the adventures that awaited them. Izuku gently woke her as they prepared to land, and she rubbed her eyes, surprised at how quickly the flight had gone. They buckled in side by side, watching as the cabin crew moved quietly through the jet. Izuku pointed out the shard as they approached London, and Ochako leaned closer, her face lighting up at the sight of the magnificent structure. Just then, a flight attendant approached, her smile directed entirely at Izuku. She asked him to fasten his seatbelt, leaning in a bit too close for comfort. Ochako felt a surge of protectiveness and irritation. Without thinking, she intertwined her fingers with Izuku's and sweetly but firmly requested the attendant to give them some space for a moment. The attendant flushed, stumbling back with an apology before retreating to her seat. Izuku turned to Ochako, confused by her sudden assertiveness. She explained that the attendant was being overly familiar, and her jealousy was evident. Izuku realized how much she cared, and he reassured her that being a prince didn't matter to him, what mattered was being her boyfriend. Ochako blushed at his words, surprised by his smoothness. He leaned in, giving her a quick kiss on the cheek and resting his head on her shoulder, making her laugh. As the jet touched down smoothly, Ochako's nerves spiked. In the private terminal, she rushed to the restroom, checking her reflection anxiously. Meanwhile, Izuku paced outside with the bodyguards, trying to remain patient. When she finally emerged, he complimented her, saying she looked better than fine and encouraged her to join him as they were awaited. Together, they walked across the polished floor, Ochako's heartbeat racing as she spotted 3 figures standing with poise, surrounded by bodyguards. Izuku's face lit up with a grin as he called out to his family, who moved forward to embrace him warmly. Ochako lingered a few steps back, her eyes fixed on the ground, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. She felt out of place, like a child staring through the glass of a world she wasn't sure she belonged in. Izuku noticed instantly. Without hesitation, he reached back and guided her forward, his hand firm around hers. He introduced her to his family with quiet pride, saying that this was his girlfriend, Ochako. Amelia's grin widened, and she playfully pointed at Hisashi, declaring that he owed her 10,000 pounds. The king sighed in defeat, while Ochako blinked in confusion until the princess explained their little bet. Father insisted that Ochako would be just a friend from school, but Amelia had argued that her little brother would never bring someone all the way to England unless she was his girlfriend. Clearly, she had been right. Hisashi sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose as Amelia laughed. Ochako bowed slightly, her voice trembling as she expressed her honor in meeting them. Inko stepped forward, her expression warm and motherly, assuring Ochako that there was no need for formality and inviting her to call them by their names. That single sentence melted a layer of tension from Ochako's shoulders. One by one, they introduced themselves more casually, each word easing her nerves until she finally managed to smile. She admitted softly that Izuku had told her a lot about them. Amelia teased that she was curious about Ochako, claiming that Izuku had been hopeless with girls forever and that she deserved a medal for getting him to confess. Izuku's face turned red at the comment, while Ochako giggled and glanced at him. She explained that it hadn't been easy, but when it happened, it just felt right. Amelia groaned playfully, declaring them disgustingly cute, but her grin showed she was delighted. Hisashi pointed out that he was not the one who needed to approve, though his eyes softened as they flicked to Izuku and Ochako's joined hands. Inko shot him a glare, urging him to cut them some slack. Ochako stiffened, unsure of what to say, but then Izuku leaned against her shoulder with a tiny smile, whispering that she was doing fine. Even though her nerves hadn't vanished completely, she found herself laughing along with Amelia's playful jabs, the tension loosening one knot at a time. This was only the beginning and Ochako knew it. But maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't be as terrifying as she thought. Later, Ochako rifled through her open suitcase, muttering to herself about where she had put her favorite items. Clothes were folded in neat stacks, but nothing looked familiar until her hand brushed against a small cosmetic bag. She pulled it free with a triumphant grin, revealing her favorite vanilla-scented shampoo and lotion, which always made her feel at home no matter where she was. After the long flight and the overwhelming first impressions of the palace, she needed something familiar. They had reached the palace a bit over an hour ago, and 𝐻𝐿𝐼 had gotten a quick tour of the enormous place. Fortunately, her room was close to Izuku's and Amelia's, so she knew exactly where to go after her shower. Her shower was quick, but the warm water washed away the stiffness in her body, and by the time she stepped out, towel drying her hair, she felt a little more like herself. It soothed the nerves she had over the impending dinner with her boyfriend's royal family. Getting ready didn't take long either. 𝐻𝐿𝐼 had never been the type to spend hours fussing in front of a mirror, but she wanted to look good for dinner. Within half an hour, she was dressed simply but neatly, her cheeks faintly flushed with nerves. Dinner wasn't for another 30 minutes, and the thought of waiting in her room with nothing but her racing thoughts for company was unbearable. She whispered to herself that maybe she could see what Amelia was doing as she slipped out into the hall. The corridors stretched wide and grand, lined with golden sconces and polished floors that reflected the light. Izuku and Amelia's rooms were supposed to be nearby, but as 𝐻𝐿𝐼 wandered, she found herself at the end of the hallway. A single enormous door stood there, untouched during her earlier tour. Curiosity sparked within her. Before she could think better of it, she glanced around and pushed the heavy door open. The hinges groaned softly, and she winced, feeling as though she had just trespassed. The air inside smelled faintly of old parchment and polish. It wasn't a bedroom at all but a vast library, with rows upon rows of shelves stretching farther than she could see. Titles lined every spine, arranged meticulously by year. Her gaze skimmed over them until something caught her eye. One spine wasn't black, brown, or gold like the others, it was red. She murmured the year, running her finger along the cover. The weight of the book seemed heavier than the others, and when she cracked it open, her stomach tightened at the first words, the assassination of the royal family. Suddenly, a voice startled her, causing her to nearly drop the book. She turned to find King Hisashi standing at the doorway. His expression wasn't furious. If anything, he looked calm, but the sheer weight of his presence made 𝐻𝐿𝐼's knees want to buckle. She stammered, scrambling for an excuse, but the words tangled in her throat. All she could do was bow her head as he walked past her, gently closing the book and sliding it back into place. She managed to apologize, explaining that she had gotten lost and was curious, but it wouldn't happen again. Hisashi studied her for a long moment, then surprised her by resting his large hand gently on her head, ruffling her hair as if she were a child. He assured her that she hadn't done anything wrong and encouraged her to ask him if there was something she wanted to know. Her head snapped up in surprise as she asked about the book. The king smiled faintly, his gaze flickering back to the shelf, shadowed with old memory. He explained that in 1975, the entire royal family was murdered, and he was the sole survivor, which was how he became crown prince and eventually king. 𝐻𝐿𝐼's throat tightened at the weight of his words. "How did you survive?" Hisashi's voice softened, almost distant as he recalled the past. He explained how he had been playing hide and seek with his cousin, the crown prince at the time. He had stayed hidden for hours, long after the game should have ended. When he finally emerged, the castle was silent and everyone was gone. The police found him later, and although the culprits were caught quickly, the memories of that night lingered. 𝐻𝐿𝐼 felt a pang of empathy in her chest. She struggled to find the right words, but her silence seemed to convey enough. Hisashi noticed her frown and chuckled softly, reassuring her that the castle was much safer now than it had been back then. He expressed his confidence that nothing like that would happen again. 𝐻𝐿𝐼 admitted that her concern was not for herself but for Izuku, who often threw himself into danger. She mentioned that while his identity as a prince remained a secret in Japan, the risks were still present. Hisashi acknowledged her worries, affirming that he thought about Izuku's safety every day. However, he expressed his trust in Izuku's judgment. If living in Japan and pursuing his dream of being a hero was what he wanted, then Hisashi would support him. He then looked at 𝐻𝐿𝐼 with kindness, reminiscent of Izuku, and said that knowing she was by Izuku's side gave him peace. 𝐻𝐿𝐼 blinked back tears and smiled, realizing where Izuku got his quiet strength. Hisashi gestured toward the door, inviting her to join him for dinner. As they walked through the grand corridors, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 felt her earlier anxiety dissipate. The thought of facing Izuku's family at the dining table no longer seemed daunting. The dining hall was as overwhelming as the rest of the castle, with a table that could seat 50, adorned with polished silver and crystal glasses, though only a few places were set. Emilia waved eagerly from her seat, while Inko rose with a warm smile as 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 entered. Emilia exclaimed that she had thought 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 got lost in the East Wing, which happened often. Hisashi shook his head, pulling out a chair for 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫. She felt her cheeks warm but managed a polite smile as she sat beside Izuku. Inko reached across the table, her hand brushing against 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫's in a gesture of reassurance, expressing how wonderful it was to finally have her there, noting that Izuku had been talking about her endlessly. Izuku groaned in embarrassment, his face turning red. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, feeling welcomed, expressed her gratitude for being there. The family responded with warm smiles. As the first courses were served, a rich and fragrant soup, the conversation flowed more easily than 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 had anticipated. Hisashi asked her about her training at UA, listening intently, while Emilia peppered her with questions about dorm life and what Izuku was like at school. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 shyly admitted that Izuku was the hardest worker she knew, glancing at him as he turned an alarming shade of red. She mentioned how he often got up early to train in secret and expressed her concern for his lack of sleep. She also noted that he was the kindest person she knew, but caught herself before revealing more, her cheeks blazing. Emilia squealed, teasing that 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 was already a better addition to the family than Izuku. He protested, but even Hisashi found it amusing. By the time the main course arrived, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 realized her nerves had faded. The royal family no longer felt like untouchable figures. They felt like a warm, albeit eccentric, family. Catching Izuku's soft smile beside her, she felt reassured that she could handle this vacation after all. As the plates were cleared, the family lingered in conversation until Hisashi stood, signaling the end of dinner. He warmly wished Izuku and 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 a good night, mentioning that tomorrow would be busy. The word busy made 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫's stomach flutter, unsure if it was from nerves or excitement. The couple excused themselves, wishing the family good night, and stepped into the quiet hallway. Izuku walked closely beside her, his hands shoved in his pockets until he hesitantly brushed one against hers. She intertwined their fingers without hesitation. After a moment of silence, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, admitting that the family had been nicer than she expected and that she had feared embarrassing herself. Izuku squeezed her hand gently, assuring her that she had been amazing and that his family already liked her. Her lips curved into a small smile as she teased that Emilia enjoyed teasing him. Izuku muttered in response, his ears turning red. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 giggled softly and leaned against his shoulder as they walked, thanking him for staying close. He replied that being with her made everything easier, even the vast palace around them. As they reached her door, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 turned to face him, her heart racing, but this time it was from the warmth in his green eyes. She wished him good night, and he leaned down to place a gentle kiss on her forehead. For a moment, they lingered, reluctant to break the spell, before she slipped into her room and he walked to his own, both smiling in the quiet glow of the palace halls. The next day, Izuku found himself slouching in a chair while his mother and sisters stood over him like generals planning a campaign. Inko had her arms crossed, a stern but amused smile on her face, while Emilia tapped her foot, glaring at his untamed curls as if they were an enemy of the crown. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, sitting on the edge of the sofa, was unsure whose side to take. The reason for the standoff was simple. Izuku's first public appearance as a prince was scheduled for that day, and according to his mother and sister, that meant his hair needed to look less disheveled. Inko coaxed him, reminding him that it had been months since his last haircut and suggesting it was time for a change. Izuku protested, defensively raising his hands to his hair. He might be shy in public, but he could be surprisingly stubborn about certain things. Emilia scoffed, commenting that he looked like he had wrestled with a hedge and lost, fluffing his curls and earning a sharp yelp from him. Izuku glared at her, determined to keep his signature look. Inko sweetly turned to 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, who had been trying to stay out of the spotlight, and asked if she agreed that it wasn't so bad. Izuku's eyes widened with hope, her opinion mattered more than anyone else's, except perhaps All Might's. Ochako hesitated, finally saying that she thought it suited Izuku, which made his face light up. However, she added, her cheeks warming, that it might be nice to see something new. The brightness in Izuku's eyes dimmed, and he slumped back in defeat. Amelia smirked, clearly enjoying the moment. Inko declared triumphantly that she would summon the royal hairdresser. Izuku muttered his thanks, while Hisashi, who had been quietly enjoying the spectacle from his armchair, chimed in that it was about time, noting that the hairdresser would know what to do with Izuku's unruly hair. Ochako leaned forward, resting a reassuring hand on Izuku's shoulder. Though she didn't speak in front of his family, her look conveyed that she liked him no matter what. Izuku sighed, knowing she meant it. Later, Izuku and his father made their way through the castle's east wing toward the royal salon. Izuku sighed again, asking if he really had to do this. Hisashi's calm smile was infuriating. He reassured Izuku that Lucas was the best in the kingdom and that if he could tame Hisashi's hair, Izuku's would be easy. Izuku muttered under his breath that wasn't the problem. When they reached the salon, Lucas, a slim man in a pristine black vest, was already waiting, his scissors gleaming. He greeted them with an enthusiastic bow, expressing it was an honor to serve the prince. Izuku was seated in the chair, a cape snapped around his shoulders. The moment Lucas's hands touched Izuku's hair, his confident grin faltered as he realized the challenge before him. Hisashi sat beside them, showing no rush to leave. Izuku nervously suggested his father didn't need to stay, but Hisashi replied that he wanted to talk. Lucas hesitated, unsure about discussing family matters during a haircut. Izuku asked what his father wanted to talk about, and Hisashi casually mentioned the bodyguards Izuku had dismissed. Lucas nearly dropped his comb in surprise. This baby-faced prince had fired bodyguards. Izuku remained unfazed, asking what about them. Hisashi informed him he had already found replacements who would start the next day, emphasizing the importance of protection. He shared a meaningful look with Izuku, referencing a past incident. Izuku nodded somberly, understanding the weight of his father's words. Hisashi slyly added that Izuku wasn't the only one who needed guarding anymore, causing Izuku's cheeks to flush. Hisashi then asked how long he and Ochako had been together. Izuku replied that it had been around a month, explaining that her parents had been hesitant at first, but they had managed to convince them. Hisashi's brows rose in surprise, and Izuku confirmed he had met her parents, describing her mother as kind and her father as strict, though they only wanted what was best for her. Hisashi laughed heartily, nudging Izuku, who covered his face with his hands in embarrassment but smiled slightly beneath them. After half an hour, Lucas dramatically whipped the cape off, revealing Izuku's transformed appearance. Izuku blinked at the mirror, noticing his curls had been tamed, looking neat yet still distinctly his. Hisashi nodded approvingly, confident that Ochako would like it. When Izuku returned to the sitting room, Amelia gasped in delight, exclaiming that he finally had a face, as before it had seemed like just hair with freckles. Izuku mumbled for her not to look at him like that, trying to hide his flushed face. Inko warmly asked Ochako for her opinion, prompting her to step closer and tilt her head as if inspecting him. She whispered for Izuku to take his hands down, and when he reluctantly did, her eyes softened. She noted that he had looked cute before, but now his handsome face stood out more. Izuku's blush deepened, and when she brushed a strand of hair back from his forehead, he didn't pull away. They both realized a moment too late that the entire royal family was watching, causing them to jump apart, cheeks blazing. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Amelia whisked Ochako off for shopping, where the princess's celebrity status turned every boutique into a whirlwind of photos and autographs. At first, Ochako was overwhelmed, but by the third shop, she learned to laugh at the attention instead of shrinking from it. Meanwhile, Izuku spent time with his parents, which somehow evolved into an intense game of Monopoly. Hisashi was dominating when Inko, with a playful air, casually asked if Izuku and Ochako had kissed yet. Izuku nearly inhaled the game piece he was holding, exclaiming in shock. Inko insisted she had a right to know, while Izuku shook his head hastily. Hisashi leaned back, amused, and admitted he was curious too. Izuku buried his face in his hands, but after a pause he admitted they had kissed. Inko squealed with delight, and 𝐬𝐮𝐴 laughed heartily, recalling how it had taken him a month to work up the courage when he met Izuku's mother. Inko corrected him, smirking and rolling her eyes, while 𝐬𝐮𝐴 sputtered about being a gentleman. Izuku watched them bicker, his embarrassment slowly giving way to quiet happiness. It was good to see his parents lively and teasing each other. But then Inko dropped a surprising question about intimacy, causing Izuku to spit water across the board and cough violently, while 𝐬𝐮𝐴 doubled over in laughter. The next morning, Izuku was jolted awake by Emilia bursting into his room, with Ochako trailing behind her. Emilia excitedly moved her phone into his hands, urging him to see something. Rubbing his face, Izuku focused on the glowing screen, his heart skipping a beat as he read the headline. He exclaimed in disbelief, questioning how, when, and who could have spread such news. Emilia, practically vibrating with outrage, expressed her frustration over how such rumors could spread overnight. Ochako, sitting calmly on the edge of the bed, observed the article and noted that it was strange for something to be published without a single source. Emilia, bristling with anger, collapsed onto the mattress beside Ochako, revealing that this wasn't the first time such rumors had circulated. Izuku and Ochako exchanged wide-eyed looks, surprised to learn that Emilia had faced similar rumors about herself not long ago. To hear that she had been dragged into the same whirlwind of speculation felt surreal. Emilia admitted to her brother that she had simply hung out with a friend, but soon people were calling him her secret boyfriend and future king. They had denied it immediately, yet the rumors clung for weeks, and even now, some whispered about it as if it were true. Izuku's expression softened as he watched his sister wrestle with the memory. Ochako felt her chest tighten, realizing that even something as innocent as spending time with a friend could spiral into a scandal. She gently expressed her relief that Emilia had managed to clear things up, but then her voice trembled as she added that in their case, the rumor was true. The room seemed to tighten around them as she contemplated how long this would last, given that Emilia's rumor had taken weeks to die down when it wasn't even real. Izuku reached out and took her hand, rubbing his thumbs soothingly over her knuckles, assuring her that his dad knew how to handle the press and would protect them. Emilia rose with a huff and smirked despite herself, suggesting she would go tell their father before they started spiraling. She paused at the doorway, teasing them that they clearly needed some alone time to talk things through and decide if they wanted to go public. With a dramatic wave, she disappeared into the corridors. Ochako inhaled deeply, trying to calm the nerves twisting in her stomach. Izuku, watching her with a soft, determined gaze, smiled faintly. He brushed her bangs behind her ear with tenderness and reassured her that he didn't want her to feel pressured. If she wanted to wait years before they told the world, he would wait as long as she was comfortable. She turned toward him, her heart fluttering, and expressed that she didn't care about timing either. It wasn't like they were dating just for fun. Izuku blushed but held her gaze, sharing his longing for a future with her, all the way to marriage someday. Ochako's breath caught in her throat, and her heart skipped a beat as she expressed her agreement. Izuku's grin was blinding as he declared his love for her. Her cheeks burned, and she stammered in surprise, though her laughter revealed her flustered happiness. Izuku leaned in, pressing a quick kiss to her lips, only for her to recoil playfully, exclaiming about his morning breath. For a moment, he looked horrified, but then laughter erupted between them, filling the quiet of the room. By breakfast, the whole family knew. Inko folded her hands on the table, disbelief evident on her face as she processed the news. 𝐬𝐮𝐴, sipping his tea, noted that a gossip magazine had published an article about a rumor of Izuku's relationship with no evidence. He turned his sharp eyes on Ochako, offering to end the rumors if it made her uncomfortable. Izuku nearly choked on his toast, and Ochako frantically shook her head, insisting that it wasn't necessary. Inko's lips twitched at her husband's bluntness before she turned her gaze to the couple, asking if they had talked about the situation. Izuku squeezed Ochako's hand and nodded, meeting his mother's eyes as he proudly declared that it didn't matter if the world knew today or years from now. They were serious about each other and planned to marry someday. Ochako blushed furiously but didn't pull her hand away. The table fell quiet for a moment before softening into warm smiles. For Izuku, surrounded by his family and the girl he loved, life felt impossibly perfect. Later that evening, Izuku stood outside Ochako's room, nervously straightening his tie. He knocked, and a muffled voice called out that she was coming. Moments later, a maid in black opened the door and bowed to him. He asked if he could come in, and she stepped aside, allowing him to find Ochako in front of the mirror. She rose when she noticed him, and for a moment he forgot how to breathe. She wore a simple black dress, strapless and floor-length, her hair in a neat bun, with minimal makeup and understated jewelry. She was elegance personified, making his chest ache. He murmured that she looked appealing, and she smiled shyly, wrapping him in a brief hug while teasing him about his matching black suit. The maid cleared her throat nervously, but Ochako kindly interrupted, saying she liked it this way. The maid bowed and left them alone. Izuku, still flustered, offered his arm, asking if she was ready. Ochako giggled and slipped her hand through his elbow, and together they walked toward the gates where family and guests were gathering. When they arrived, all eyes turned toward them, and both blushed deeply. Amelia smiled proudly, having arranged their outfits. Their parents chuckled as they approached, and Hisashi introduced two men behind them as Izuku's new guards, both licensed heroes sworn to protect him and Ochako as if she were royal herself. Izuku nodded seriously, asking them to treat Ochako with the same care as him, and the guards replied in unison. Ochako's cheeks warmed again as Izuku laced his fingers through hers. At the dinner party hosted by the royal family, it was Izuku's first formal appearance as prince, and so far, everything had gone smoothly. The royals, including Ochako sitting by Izuku's side, had their own table, drawing plenty of attention. Whispers and stolen glances seemed to orbit around them, no matter how much they tried to focus on their own conversation. The weight of being observed was new to Ochako, but she held herself with quiet determination, her hand brushing against Izuku's under the table whenever her nerves crept in. Once dinner ended and guests began mingling, Ochako glanced nervously around the ballroom, not recognizing anyone among the sea of richly dressed nobles. Suddenly, Izuku froze beside her, his eyes locking on someone across the room. He called out to Daniel, a young man with dark brown hair who smiled and hurried over. Daniel greeted Izuku warmly, clapping him into a quick hug, and then noticed Ochako, giving a polite nod. Izuku introduced her as his girlfriend, and Daniel extended his hand with practiced courtesy. Ochako shook it politely, her mind buzzing with questions. Before the conversation could continue, the air around them shifted as guests began to whisper louder, casting curious, not-so-subtle looks their way. Izuku caught fragments of gossip drifting through the crowd. Some murmured about a young man rumored to be courting the princess, while others noted he was speaking with the prince. The whispers made Izuku tense, and he noticed Daniel's smile falter slightly as he shifted his weight, his composure cracking under the weight of speculation. Not long after, Amelia appeared, her steps measured and her expression poised. Her presence immediately drew even more stares, but she acted as if she didn't hear a word. She greeted Daniel politely, though her smile was restrained. Amelia calmly informed Izuku and Ochako that it was getting late and suggested they return to the castle. Her voice carried no sadness, only certainty. Amelia had learned long ago how to maintain her dignity, even when people whispered behind her back. Before they could leave, the lights flickered, and the crystal chandeliers swayed. Suddenly, there was a crash as the ballroom windows shattered inward, glass spraying across the polished floor. Guests screamed as smoke filled the room. From the haze, dark figures emerged, clad in mismatched armor and masks. One of them snarled that the Windsor family was finally gathered in one place and that tonight, the line would end. Jacob shouted, pushing Inko, Hisashi, and Amelia behind a barricade of guards. Izuku and Ochako were too far away. Without hesitation, Izuku activated full cowling, green lightning crackling around him as he removed his suit jacket. He urged Ochako to join him, and she quickly ripped her dress at the knees. Her fingers grazed the marble floor as her quirk activated, lifting the tiles and shaking the ground. She raised the tiles along with the villains, making them sway in the air. Izuku leaped into action, slamming a powerful blow into the nearest enemy, sending him crashing into two others mid-air. The shockwave rattled the chandeliers, but Ochako released her quirk just in time, dropping the floating enemies into the debris below. She called out to the terrified nobles to evacuate, guiding them to safety. Another villain lunged at her, blade glinting. Izuku darted between them, grabbing the attacker and slamming him to the ground, declaring that no one would harm her. Another villain hissed and fired a blast of dark energy at him, but Ochako intercepted it with a floating marble tile, dispersing the energy harmlessly. The villains realized they were working together too effectively and began to retreat. A large fire burst forth, revealing a furious Emilia, who emerged from the flames. She declared that they would not escape and launched fireballs at the villains, engulfing the area they occupied. Among the villains, one with a barrier quirk shielded himself and his comrades, and they attempted to flee through the windows they had entered. Emilia's eyes burned with intensity as she ordered the guards to pursue the escaping villains. The ballroom was left in chaos. Broken glass glittered on the marble like sharp confetti, smoke hung thick in the air, and the chandeliers trembled on their chains. Slowly, the terrified murmurs of the nobles gave way to applause. At first hesitant, then growing louder until the entire ballroom erupted with clapping and shouts of praise. Guests remarked on how the prince and his companion moved together with perfect coordination, and they marveled at Emilia's display of power. Izuku straightened, placing a hand on the small of Ochako's back, his chest heaving and green sparks still crackling along his arms. Beside him, Ochako brushed dust from her torn dress, her cheeks flushed but her eyes sharp as she scanned the room for any remaining threats. Emilia stood near the shattered windows, her hands glowing faintly with embers, her expression fierce and unyielding. Then Hisashi and Inko stepped forward, and the crowd parted instantly, bowing their heads as the king and queen approached their children. Hisashi's voice carried effortlessly through the hall, deep and commanding. He began by acknowledging that the night could have ended in tragedy, but thanks to the swift actions of his children and Ochako, it did not. He paused, allowing his words to resonate before softening his tone. He praised Izuku, Ochako, and Emilia for fighting not as royals, but as protectors, with courage, instinct, and unity. Inko, graceful and radiant even in the smoke-filled hall, added with a warm smile that they were beyond proud, not only as their king and queen but as their parents. She expressed gratitude for their protection of lives that night and for upholding everything their family and kingdom stood for. The nobles murmured in agreement, their gazes lingering especially on Izuku and Ochako, whose teamwork had been undeniable. Ochako shifted nervously under the attention, but Izuku squeezed her hand, a subtle gesture of reassurance. Emilia, standing tall with soot on her fingers and firelight still dancing in her eyes, accepted the stares with regal calm. Hisashi turned back to the guests, his voice ringing with authority. He declared that those who dared threaten the family would find themselves defeated, not just by guards, but by the strength of those who bore the 𝐻𝐻𝐿 name and those who stood with them. The hall thundered with approval, and for the first time since the glass shattered, a sense of safety settled back into the air. The family and their closest guards slipped out of the ruined ballroom, leaving the shaken nobles in the care of attendants. A quieter corridor of the castle welcomed them, lined with tall windows and flickering torchlight. Here, the applause and murmurs of the guests faded into a muffled hum behind closed doors. Izuku turned to Ochako, worry etched across his face as he asked if she was hurt or if any of the villains had touched her. His hands hovered over her arms and shoulders, as if afraid to miss even the smallest scratch. Ochako assured him that she was fine, just a torn dress and a little dust. He remained unconvinced and insisted on checking for cuts, brushing her bangs aside with a concentrated expression. Ochako laughed softly, despite herself, and teased him about being impossible, though her heart warmed at the sincerity in his eyes. She reassured him that they had each other's backs and that he had kept her safe. His shoulders finally eased, though he still looked as if he might wrap her in protective layers if he could. Inko stepped forward, her green eyes shimmering with emotion as she cupped both Izuku's and Ochako's faces in turn. She praised their magnificent performance that night, expressing that watching them fight side by side felt right. Hisashi followed, his voice steady but filled with pride. He acknowledged that they had saved not just their family but everyone in the ballroom, and they did so with the calm and unity of heroes twice their age. Izuku blushed and ducked his head, scratching the back of his neck as he humbly thanked his parents, explaining that he and Ochako were training to be heroes, and protecting people was expected of them. Ochako nodded firmly beside him, affirming that they couldn't take too much credit. If anything, that night reminded them of how much further they still had to go. For a moment, silence stretched in the corridor. Then Hisashi smiled, proud yet wistful. He spoke about humility, emphasizing how it would keep them grounded when the world tried to lift them too high. Amelia, still dusted with soot but standing tall, smirked knowingly, suggesting that it would make her even more dangerous to anyone who underestimated her. Inko suddenly pulled all three into an embrace, Izuku, Ochako, and Amelia together. With a voice thick with emotion, she made them promise to look out for each other, always. Izuku tightened his grip on Ochako's hand, affirming that they already did. Ochako met his gaze and smiled softly, assuring him that they always would. Later that night, Ochako found herself standing outside Amelia's chambers, hesitating for just a moment before knocking. Amelia's voice called her in. Inside, the 19-year-old sat on her bed with a book in her hands. She appeared composed, though a faint trace of weariness lingered in her eyes. Ochako took a seat beside her and commented on how hectic the day had been. Amelia closed the book and set it neatly on her lap, agreeing that the dinner party had been more exhausting than fighting villains. Ochako hesitated before gently pressing her concerns, noting that Amelia seemed quieter than usual. When Amelia finally spoke, her voice was steady as she revealed that Daniel was the friend she had mentioned before, the one from the rumors. Ochako blinked, realizing that the awkwardness before the attack made perfect sense. Amelia explained that her feelings for Daniel were complicated. She cared about him, but once the rumors started, everything shifted. He had become more distant and guarded, and she couldn't decide if it was because of her or what being near her represented. Amelia's calm words carried a quiet ache, revealing the weight of her crown in every interaction. She acknowledged that she couldn't change being a princess, it was part of who she was. Yet, she wondered if people saw her or just her title. Ochako frowned, feeling empathy tighten her chest. She assured Amelia that anyone who couldn't accept both sides didn't deserve her. Princess or not, she was strong, kind, and brave, and if Daniel or anyone else couldn't handle that, they weren't worth her time. For the first time that night, Amelia laughed softly, acknowledging Ochako's boldness. She squeezed the younger girl's hand, her composure returning. They both agreed that they couldn't shrink themselves to fit someone else's comfort. Ochako grinned, relieved to see Amelia's usual spark returning, and suggested a girls' night. Just the two of them, with no rumors, titles, or politics, only fun. Amelia considered it for a moment before smiling, agreeing that it sounded perfect. Back at UA, Ochako and Izuku had just returned from their whirlwind trip to England, which had been packed with horseback riding, family dinners, and unexpected excitement. Jacob and Noah, their new bodyguards, had scooted them back but would now return to England, as UA protocols didn't allow foreign royal guards to linger. Both Izuku and Ochako felt the trip had been too short, but Izuku felt warm satisfaction knowing how welcomed his girlfriend was by his family. Even Amelia, who had teased him relentlessly, promised to visit him in Japan soon, which made him sweat nervously at the thought of potentially blowing his cover. However, seeing how sincerely his sister had tried to comfort him, he chose to smile instead. He was experiencing mixed feelings. On one hand, he was happy that his parents had reconciled, but on the other, it meant he no longer had a home to return to in Japan. Sensing his sadness, Amelia attempted to comfort him as best she could. Izuku waved goodbye to his guards and enthusiastically told Ochako it was time to go. He wheeled his bike toward the gates, instructing her to head to the dorms first while he parked. Ochako agreed and rushed ahead. As soon as she entered the dorm, she flopped onto the entryway floor with a dramatic sigh, feeling exhausted. Ashido's cheerful voice greeted her as she leaned over Ochako's upside-down face, quickly pulling her into a tight hug. Ochako laughed, dragging her suitcase out of the way and realizing she needed to move it before Izuku tripped over it. Ashido asked where Izuku was, and 𝐻𝐿 informed her that he was parking his bike and would be there shortly. Almost on cue, Izuku entered, sheepishly asking if she had seen his power bank. He greeted 𝐻𝐿, who complimented his new haircut. 𝐻𝐿 teased him about being forgetful while retrieving the missing power bank from her purse, causing him to scratch his cheek in embarrassment. 𝐻𝐿 groaned, playfully commenting that they acted like a married couple, which made her feel incredibly single before she waved dramatically and left. Izuku and 𝐻𝐿 dragged their luggage upstairs and were soon swept into a reunion with their classmates in the common room. The cheers, chatter, and compliments about Izuku's haircut made him revert to his shy and mumbling self. When their classmates turned their attention to them, 𝐻𝐿 leaned forward with a mischievous grin, asking how their trip to England had been and if they had secretly gotten married. 𝐻𝐿 nearly fell off her seat, flailing her arms in protest. Izuku, cheeks pink, explained that they had spent a lot of time with his family and done some sightseeing. Kaminari chimed in, smirking and asking if they had stayed in a royal suite. The class chuckled, leaning closer, eager for secrets. Izuku nervously laughed, clarifying that they had stayed somewhere bigger with stables, where they went horseback riding often. 𝐬𝐿 raised his eyebrows, questioning what kind of place had stables. 𝐻𝐿 quickly jumped in, smiling sheepishly as she explained that it was more countryside than city, and his family wanted to show her a quieter side of England. Though her explanation seemed to satisfy most of the class, 𝐻𝐿 remained skeptical, crossing her arms with a pout and expressing her disbelief. Izuku and 𝐻𝐿 felt their faces heat up as laughter erupted in the room, breaking the earlier tension. The atmosphere was lively when Hagikure's voice suddenly chimed in from an unseen corner, asking if they had shared a room during their trip. The laughter faded instantly, and all eyes turned to the two, who turned beet red in unison. 𝐻𝐿 flailed her arms, insisting they had separate rooms, while Izuku stammered in agreement, his face buried in his hands as he trailed off. The room erupted again, with 𝐻𝐿 nearly rolling on the floor and even Todoroki raising an eyebrow in amusement. Hagikure laughed, claiming she was only joking, but the teasing chorus of lovebirds followed Izuku and 𝐻𝐿 into the night. Not long after, Izuku excused himself, citing an early morning training session. He leaned over the back of the sofa where 𝐻𝐿 sat, wrapping his arms around her shoulders and reminding her not to stay up too late. She smiled up at him, wishing him sweet dreams. Mineta groaned, exclaiming that they were being overly affectionate, which sent the class into another fit of laughter. Blushing, Izuku waved goodnight as he retreated upstairs. The next morning, Izuku jogged across campus, shivering slightly in the chilly air. He spotted All Might, who was bundled in a beige coat, and called out to him. All Might greeted him warmly, noting that it had been too long since they had spoken one-on-one. He complimented Izuku's new haircut, which made Izuku's eyes sparkle with joy. All Might then mentioned hearing from Kaminari about Izuku dating Uraraka, expressing his relief that Izuku was living life fully and not denying himself happiness. Izuku felt a wave of relief wash over him, affirming that he had no plans to break up with 𝐻𝐿 anytime soon. They shared a laugh before diving into their training, their camaraderie as strong as ever. A week later, Class 2A settled into their second-year routines. Coursework was tougher, but the energy remained lively and competitive. During homeroom, Aizawa, wrapped in his yellow sleeping bag, announced that the sports festival was in 2 weeks and that special guests would be attending. The class buzzed with excitement, with Bakugou declaring his determination to win, while Kirishima reminded him to calm down. Izuku chuckled at Bakugou's typical enthusiasm. 𝐻𝐿 leaned against Izuku's desk, her eyes bright with curiosity about the special guests. Izuku shrugged, feeling an unshakable sense that this year's sports festival would be a turning point. As they trained, Ida offered precise feedback, helping Izuku improve his shoot-style technique. Across the training grounds, All Might and Aizawa supervised, occasionally stepping in with critiques. Izuku caught glimpses of 𝐻𝐿 training hard with 𝐶U, her determination evident. He wanted to talk to her but knew better than to interrupt her focus. Finally, Aizawa called for a break, and Izuku quickly crossed the floor to 𝐻𝐿, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She jumped slightly, embarrassed about being sweaty. He reassured her that it didn't bother him, and they shifted the conversation to their training progress. Aizawa's voice cut through their moment, reminding them they were still in class, causing them to spring apart, both blushing. Once Aizawa turned away, Izuku leaned closer, lowering his voice to ask if she had spoken to Emilia lately. Ochako confirmed that Emilia was doing better, easing Izuku's concern. He expressed his happiness that Ochako got along well with his family, and she playfully teased him about her dad's opinion of him. 1 week later, the class lounged in the common room after dinner, the TV humming quietly in the background. Their peaceful chatter was abruptly interrupted when 2 men burst through the doors, weapons raised. Izuku instinctively moved in front of Ochako, ready to protect her, as quirks activated around the room. Then he blinked, recognizing the men as Jacob and Noah, who froze mid-threat and lowered their weapons upon addressing him as Your Highness. Bakugou erupted in confusion, demanding to know what was happening, while Izuku stammered, trying to explain the situation. Izuku's voice carried an unusual authority, shocking and silencing even Bakugou. Jacob explained that they were under orders. When pressed by Izuku about whose orders, a tall blonde figure entered the room, fire in her eyes and a smug grin on her lips. She introduced herself as Emilia Midoriya Windsor, hero name Blaze, and announced that she would be their new quirk education instructor. The room erupted in disbelief. Izuku and Ochako exclaimed in unison, shocked by the revelation. Izuku felt a sinking feeling as he realized Emilia had not informed them. Emilia casually mentioned that Izuku had never had the courage to share their royal background, pointing out that they were the Prince and Princess of Great Britain. Chaos ensued as classmates reacted with surprise, and Bakugou laughed, dismissing the idea of Izuku being royalty. Emilia's smile turned sharp as she reminded Bakugou of her authority as a teacher, warning him to choose his words wisely. The atmosphere shifted, filled with nervous giggles until Aizawa entered, confirming Emilia's role. All Might suggested she might want to skip the dramatic entrance next time. Emilia chuckled, explaining that she was merely testing their reflexes and that there was much work ahead. Once their classmates had left, Izuku lingered by the common room window, feeling pale and tired. Ochako gently took his hand, asking if he was okay. Izuku hesitated, expressing his uncertainty about how everyone would perceive him now that they knew his background. He felt as though he had lost the normal life he had worked hard to build at UA. Ochako reassured him that he hadn't lost himself and that he was still Izuku, still her classmate and boyfriend. She encouraged him to prove to everyone that he was still the same person, reminding him that he had never let fear stop him before. Izuku felt a mix of awe and affection for her words, chuckling weakly at her newfound wisdom. As they shared a moment of connection, Izuku expressed relief at no longer having to hide his identity. Ochako acknowledged that while it was scary, it could also be a good thing. For the first time that evening, Izuku allowed himself to relax, thanking her for her support. They embraced, feeling a warmth that contrasted with the earlier tension. The next day, Emilia stood confidently before the gathered Hero Corps students, the morning sun glinting off her blonde hair. She welcomed them to their first quirk education lesson, introducing herself and expressing her eagerness to teach. The students murmured among themselves, surprised by the presence of a young pro-hero as their instructor. Emilia instructed them to acknowledge their weak spots before training began. Confused glances were exchanged, and Kendo bravely asked for clarification. Emilia explained that each student would take turns stating their quirk and admitting a weakness. She emphasized the importance of this exercise for teamwork. To demonstrate, Emilia showcased her quirk, pyrokinesis, generating controlled flames. She admitted her weakness, losing control when fire spreads too wide. This prompted immediate questions from the students, who began to engage with her idea. Emilia explained that acknowledging weaknesses helps clarify them and fosters teamwork, encouraging students to support one another in refining their techniques. The atmosphere shifted as they began to understand the value of vulnerability in their growth as heroes. Even Izuku found himself grinning. He admired how Emilia was handling the students with such professionalism. His thoughts were interrupted by Emilia's confident voice as she addressed the two classes. She mentioned that she had watched all the footage from their final exams, giving her a good understanding of their weaknesses. However, this exercise was meant for her to learn about their personal goals. 𝗧𝗧𝗟𝗘 raised his hand next, expressing his excitement about Emilia knowing all their names and quirks. He also inquired if she was related to Midoriya from Class A, noting their shared last name. The class erupted into whispers, and Izuku buried his face in his hands, while Ochako giggled quietly beside him. Emilia laughed and clarified that Izuku was her younger brother, adding humorously that she didn't date younger men, even if they were as cute as Izuku. She playfully pinched his cheek, causing him to whine in embarrassment as the class chuckled. Mineta dramatically collapsed to his knees, lamenting the situation, which only prompted groans from the girls. Emilia redirected the focus back to the exercise, asking Yaoyorozu to start. Momo stepped forward, introducing herself and explaining her quirk, creation, which allowed her to form non-living objects from her exposed skin. She shared her main weakness of stamina and her longing to train her endurance. Emilia praised her before moving on to the next student. Each student spoke honestly about their quirks and goals. When it was Izuku's turn, he shifted nervously before introducing himself as Izuku Midoriya, hero named Deku. He explained that his quirk enhanced his strength but came with the risk of injury if used at full power. Monoma snickered at him, mocking his lack of a quirk name, but was quickly silenced by Kendo. Izuku defended himself, mentioning that his quirk had manifested late, which garnered understanding nods from his classmates. Ochako followed, introducing herself as Ochako Uraraka, hero named Uravity. She explained her quirk, zero gravity, and her goal to push her limits without feeling sick. Emilia smiled proudly at her before continuing the exercise. By the end, the initial awkwardness had transformed into lively discussion, with students exchanging tips and encouragement across class lines. Emilia received many questions, both about herself and advice regarding their weaknesses. As the lesson concluded, Emilia emphasized the importance of trust and teamwork, noting that they would face tougher challenges together in the future. She then called out to Aizawa and Vlad, who emerged from behind the building. Aizawa's expression remained neutral while Vlad smiled sheepishly. Emilia acknowledged that she had known they were watching, and Aizawa commended her performance, stating that it served as an unofficial final exam. Vlad nervously confirmed that she had passed with flying colors, prompting cheers from the students. Emilia felt a surge of pride, warmth flickering in her palms. The class buzzed with excitement as they returned to the dorms, discussing each other's quirks and laughing about Monoma's earlier outburst. Emilia lingered behind with Aizawa and Vlad, discussing notes and training plans. Izuku waited just outside the field until Ochako joined him, his freckled face glowing with excitement. He expressed his admiration for Emilia's teaching skills and how she made everyone feel at ease. Ochako agreed, noting Emilia's passion and ability to build trust. Izuku blushed but smiled, acknowledging Emilia's intensity and predicting that she would push them hard in training. They walked back to the dorms together, the sounds of their classmates buzzing in the background, creating a sense of calm between them. Izuku looked up at the fading sunlight, determined to catch up to Emilia one day. Ochako squeezed his hand, assuring him that she believed he would. The morning of the sports festival was filled with chaos and excitement. The dorms of Class 2A felt like a whirlwind, with students running in every direction, their nerves palpable. Kaminari froze mid-stride, confused about what he was looking for, expressing his frustration over his nervousness. Siro, lounging on the couch, reminded Izuku that Emilia, as a teacher, had to know what was coming that day. Izuku explained that she hadn't shared any details with him, as she wasn't allowed to. Mineta exclaimed in disbelief that Izuku hadn't even asked, lamenting the situation dramatically. Ida defended Izuku, emphasizing the importance of integrity as a hero. The others voiced their concerns about the unpredictability of the upcoming events, knowing that this year's theme was surprise attacks without any previews or practice runs. Despite their previous experiences with attacks, the uncertainty of what lay ahead was always daunting. For Izuku, the sports festival was not the only thing weighing on his mind. Yesterday's private conversation with Emilia replayed in Izuku's mind like a broken record. She had pulled him aside during Quirk Ed, her expression unusually serious. Even Noah and Jacob weren't allowed to follow. Emilia's voice had been low but firm as she informed him that one of the guards had just told her their parents had been attacked at the palace the previous night. Izuku's heart sank at the news. He had to force himself to breathe as he asked who was responsible. Emilia had replied that they didn't know yet, but it might be the same group from the dinner banquet. She reassured him that their parents were safe, but the incident meant the threat was closer than they had thought. She urged him not to let his guard down for a second. When they returned to class, Ochako had immediately taken his hand under the desk, her thumb brushing across his knuckles as she searched his face with concern. He couldn't lie to her about what had happened. He told her their parents had been attacked but were fine, asking her to promise to stay alert. Now, standing in the waiting area of the stadium, the roar of the crowd echoed overhead, and Izuku tried to shake off the memory. The sports festival had to be his focus. He owed that much to his classmates and himself. President Mick's voice boomed across the arena, welcoming everyone to you. High School Sports Festival. The cheers were deafening, flags waved, and the energy of thousands of spectators pressed down on the students waiting to march out. Izuku scanned the stands instinctively, hoping to catch a glimpse of his sister, but she was nowhere in sight. Then the announcement came through the speakers, revealing that Emilia was there as the newest teacher and pro-hero, Blaze. Izuku's jaw dropped in surprise. Emilia's voice carried over the stadium, strong and confident. President Mike leaned toward her with exaggerated drama, asking about her recent start at 𝐸 and why she had come to Japan. The crowd leaned in eager for a fairy tale answer. Emilia explained that while her royal duties were important, she had come to support her younger brother, who was alone, while also focusing on her hero work. Izuku felt dozens of eyes on him as his classmates smirked and whispered, nudging him until his ears turned crimson. President Mike then announced that they had been waiting for the special guests to arrive, the King and Queen of Great Britain. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers as Izuku's breath caught. His parents were right there, waving from the VIP balcony, surrounded by guards. His heart raced as Todoroki, standing beside him, asked if those were his parents and if he had known they would be there. Izuku could only shake his head in disbelief. Ochako leaned closer, her voice soft with relief, noting that at least they knew his parents were safe. Emilia blinked in surprise from the commentary booth, having not known they would be attending either. President Mike cleared his throat, announcing that it was time to begin the festival. The students filed out onto the arena floor, some trembling with nerves while others grinned with anticipation. Izuku felt the weight of two battles on his shoulders, competing in front of Japan's biggest audience and knowing his parents were watching. Todoroki offered a quiet word of encouragement, recalling how his own father had watched him last year. Izuku managed a thin smile in response. President Mick's voice rang out again, asking Emilia to announce the first event. Her confident voice filled the arena, declaring that the first challenge was an obstacle course. A wave of groans rolled through the students at the mention of the same event as last year, but President Mike assured them that the course had been upgraded. Meanwhile, in the VIP balcony, the King and Queen leaned forward, their eyes fixed on their son. Inko expressed her excitement about seeing Izuku at the festival for the first time, while Hisashi felt guilt for not being there in previous years. Inko reassured him that they were present now, which was what mattered. Their moment was interrupted by a guard announcing distinguished guests requesting an audience. Inko brightened at the sight of All Might, who bowed deeply, followed by Aizawa, who also offered a respectful bow. After quick introductions, the royal couple eagerly asked about Izuku's progress. Aizawa confirmed that Izuku trained harder than almost anyone in his year, and All Might added with pride that he pushed himself beyond limits. Even if his quirk was difficult to control, he had already made it his own. Inko's eyes glistened, relief softening her features. Hisashi nodded, a quiet pride burning in his gaze. Aizawa respectfully excused himself after a while, leaving only All Might with the royal couple. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. There was more they should know about their son. Inko's expression turned serious, her eyes full of concern as she urged him to continue. The king and queen listened in silence as All Might spoke, his voice low but steady. He revealed how one for all had been passed down through generations, a torch carried through the darkness. He explained that Izuku had once been quirkless, yet he had leapt forward without hesitation when his friend was in danger. On that very day, All Might had chosen him, their son, to inherit the power that came with both unimaginable strength and a heavy burden. By the time he finished, Inko's hand trembled against her lips. She whispered, stunned, that he had truly been quirkless. Memories flashed before her, Izuku's tears as a child, asking why he wasn't like the other kids. All those years of trying to console him when she had no answers. He had never told her. He just smiled and said he would figure things out. Beside her, 𝐻𝐮𝐲𝗘 sat utterly still, his jaw tight. His eyes, initially cold steel, flicked toward his wife, and in that instant, something softened. The harshness ebbed into quiet fury, not directed at Izuku, but at the weight that had been placed upon him. He finally spoke, his voice low but cutting, acknowledging the truth. All this time, their son had been fighting a battle no child should have faced, and he had carried it alone. All Might met his gaze unflinchingly. Yes, he confirmed, Izuku had never faltered. He embraced the weight, knowing what it meant, and chose this path. Inko's voice cracked as she turned to All Might, expressing her disbelief that such a dangerous burden could be placed on her son. Her eyes shone with unshed tears, the protective rage of a mother trembling beneath the surface. All Might spoke quietly, for once appearing almost small and human. He explained that he hadn't asked Izuku to take on this burden. He had offered him a chance. Izuku had been the only one to run forward when everyone else froze. Even though he was quirkless, he chose to fight. All Might had simply given him the tool to match his heart. For a long moment, the balcony was silent except for the roar of the crowd below. Then 𝐻𝐮𝐲𝗘 exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. The weight in his voice was undeniable. Izuku had accepted the power knowing the risks, which meant he also accepted the destiny tied to it. If Izuku believed he could shoulder it, then 𝐻𝐮𝐲𝗘 would believe in him as well. He was his son. Inko's shoulders shook, torn between fear and pride. She pressed her face into 𝐻𝐮𝐲𝗘's arm, clinging to the one anchor she had. He would always be her little boy, she whispered fiercely. 𝐻𝐮𝐲𝗘 answered gently, wrapping an arm around her. His gaze returned to All Might, sharp, steady, and commanding. If All Might had given Izuku this burden, he better do his part. He needed to teach and protect him until he could stand taller than even All Might. All Might straightened, his own eyes shining. He promised, on his life, until his last breath, to fulfill that duty. It was then that 𝐻𝐮𝐲𝗘's expression shifted, the usual steel giving way to a rare, quiet smile. He reached out, offering his hand, suggesting they stake a wager on whether his son would rise to this impossible task. All Might's lips twitched into a grin as he clasped the king's hand, the two men meeting as equals. He declared, he had seen it. Izuku Midoriya would surpass them all. Present Mick's voice jolted the students back to the present, asking if everyone was ready and then starting the countdown. As the numbers counted down, Izuku burst forward, green lightning sparking across his body. His vow echoed in his head, don't disappoint them. He caught up to Todoroki and Ida, until Bakugou roared past in an explosion, taunting him. Izuku gritted his teeth, activating full cowling at 15%. The cliff loomed ahead, a sheer drop of 100 meters. Students balked, staring down at the daunting fall. Ochako called his name, already having a plan with Ishido and Tsuyu. Izuku sprinted over, asking to join in. Ochako's cheeks flushed, but she nodded, insisting he better contribute. Together, they executed their plan. Ochako's zero gravity lowered the group in pairs, Tsuyu cushioned their landings, Izuku adjusted momentum, and Ishido provided moral support. It was teamwork born of trust, polished into efficiency. Ishido and Tsuyu went first. When it was their turn, Ochako's strength faltered, nausea curling in her stomach as they floated down. Izuku hugged her tightly, concern etched on his face as her knees buckled. He lunged forward, catching her before she could stumble and pressed gently against her back, steadying her. She just needed a second to recover. Without hesitating, Izuku crouched low, presenting his back. He insisted she hop on, reminding her that she had carried him down the cliff. Ochako's face turned crimson, torn between protest and warmth rising in her chest. She reluctantly climbed onto his back, and he secured her under his arms. After a brief sprint using full cowling at 15%, they reached the second obstacle. Once Ochako slid off his back, he wished her good luck and promised to see her later. In a moment of spontaneity, he placed a quick kiss on her lips. Ochako squeaked, flustered and embarrassed, smacking his shoulder and insisting it was not the time for such displays. But it was too late. The cameras caught the moment clearly. Izuku leaning in, Ochako's flustered expression, the unmistakable kiss on the lips. Present Mick's voice nearly shattered the speakers as he announced the unexpected moment, declaring them a power couple. The crowd erupted in a wave of gasps, cheers, and laughter, with some parents dramatically covering their children's eyes while teenagers screamed in delight. Some even started chanting their names together. Amelia, sitting beside Present Mike, laughed heartily at the situation. Ochako nearly combusted on the spot, her face redder than Kirishima's hair. She sprinted after her boyfriend, fists clenched, vowing to confront him. Izuku laughed, exhilarated, running faster and not caring about the cameras or the noise. He playfully remarked that she was starting to sound like Bakugou. Hisashi slammed a fist on the railing, roaring with laughter so loud that some of the guards jumped. All Might joined in, laughing heartily beside him, tears of joy streaming down his face as he exclaimed about young love. The king wiped his eyes, his voice booming across the private balcony, expressing pride in the boy's recklessness. Inko sat between them, hands folded neatly in her lap. She sighed softly, her eyes sparkling with amusement as she reflected on the unexpected display of affection in front of thousands of people, a small smile tugging at her lips. In the humble living room of the Uraraka family, Ochako's parents sat on the edge of the couch, hands pressed together in anticipation. Mrs. Uraraka commented on how strong their daughter looked, while Mr. Uraraka crossed his arms tightly, expressing concern over the boy's intentions. Then the kiss happened, and the silence in the room was palpable. Mrs. Uraraka's eyes widened, and her hands flew to her mouth in shock. Mr. Uraraka nearly fell off the couch, his face turning crimson as he pointed at the screen, unable to find the words to express his disbelief at the prince kissing his daughter in front of the entire country. Meanwhile, Mrs. Uraraka began to giggle behind her hands, her cheeks flushed with excitement. She noted how happy Ochako looked, proud of their daughter. Mr. Uraraka groaned into his hands, expressing his frustration at the situation. He warned that if the boy ever showed up again, he would have words for him, his voice cracking as he struggled between being flustered and angry. Mrs. Uraraka leaned over, patting his arm with a knowing smile, reminding him that he had approved of their dating and that moments like this were inevitable. Mr. Uraraka froze, feeling defeated, and muttered that it didn't mean he had to like it, his eyes stubbornly glued to the screen. Yet, the small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth revealed his true feelings.